Hey, are you really just leaving like this? Shu Sheng was taken aback. What else should I do? I've patched the roof for you, albeit not in the most professional manner, but it should suffice for the time being. Shu Sheng turned around, shaking his backside slightly. To his astonishment, it was almost blinding. Qian Yi declared it was too much to behold. Does a fleeting moment of attention equate to a lifetime of care? One walked ahead, while the other trailed behind, dragging along. As noon approached, the farmers began returning home in succession. Chapter 30. Ma Dou had just finished weeding in the fields, returning drenched in sweat. As he lifted his head, he was momentarily stunned to see a girl approaching, strikingly beautiful, reminiscent of the spring blossoms. The young woman donned an orange garment, her figure curvaceous, her face plump, with features that were well-defined and eyes that sparkled with clarity. As she walked, there was an effortless grace about her. Ma Dou glanced at himself, covered in dirt with sweat dripping down his face, instantly feeling a pang of inferiority, and he instinctively took a step back. He had no idea which family's girl she belonged to. She didn't seem to be from the village, so she must have been a relative of someone. Ma Dou felt a bittersweet twinge in his heart, akin to seeing a fruit that might hang from someone else's tree. "Excuse me, young sir, is there a market today?" The girl approached him directly. Yes, today is the 15th, and there is. Ma Dou stammered nervously. "Is it straight ahead?" "Ah, yes, just keep going straight." Ma Dou licked his lips, his face suddenly inexplicably flushed. Qian Yi shot him a puzzled glance, thanked him, and then walked away. Ma Dou continued to foolishly gaze at Qian Yi's retreating figure when suddenly a shadow loomed over him. Startled, he looked up to find the village's impoverished scholar, Shu Sheng, glaring at him with a sullen expression. Shu the scholar, why are you looking at me like that?" He instinctively took a step back. "Is she pretty?" Shu Sheng fixed his expressionless gaze upon him. "What?" Ma Dou looked at him in confusion. Shu Sheng asked, "What were you just staring at?" I? Ma Dou felt his face burning with embarrassment. "I wasn't looking at anything." "Is that so?" Shu Sheng nodded. "I thought you were staring at that girl, practically drooling." Where is that?" Ma Dou nearly choked on his own words, his hands and feet flailing as he hurriedly explained, Don't say that. Remember, do not gaze at what is inappropriate." Shu Sheng cautioned him. Ma Dou gaped in astonishment, perplexed at what had gotten into him today. As evening descended, the night began to draw its curtain. Although the moon had long since risen, the sky remained bright. By a bonfire, a simple stove made of a few stones was laid with a thin sheet of iron, which was scrubbed clean, upon which sizzling slices of pork belly were cooking. How fragrant! Pan-frying like this is far more aromatic than boiling, and simpler than roasting. Qian Yi delightedly dipped a piece in sesame sauce, then popped it into her mouth. This is heavenly. She then sought out some chili oil to add to it. Ah, if only the abbess were here, she would surely scold me for filling the entire temple with the scent of meat. As she ate, Qian Yi sighed with a hint of melancholy. Bang, bang. The door to the temple was banged on forcefully. Creak. Qian Yi opened the door, scrutinizing the uninvited guest, frowning. "What brings you here?" "This noble lady, could you kindly spare a meal?" Shu Sheng tugged at her sleeve, speaking with a pitiful tone. "Even if I refuse, you're already here." Qian Yi huffed as she stepped aside. Shu Sheng hurried inside, and upon entering, he exaggeratedly exclaimed, "Wow, Qian Yi, are you committing sacrilege in front of the Buddha? This is no longer a temple." Qian Yi replied indifferently. Shu Sheng was taken aback, admiring her resolve. "You certainly go to great lengths for the sake of meat." Qian Yi picked up a piece of fried tofu, dipped it in sauce, and then devoured it. "Scholar, do you read too much? You always have so much to say." Feeling slighted, Shu Sheng could only squat, and watch her relish the meat and tofu. Could you spare a bit? Shu Shang's eyes were almost popping out. If I say no, will you not eat? Qianyi continued to eat without looking up, casually snatching the largest, thickest piece of sizzling pork belly, something Shu Shang had been eyeing for quite some time. No! He cried out in despair, startling Qianyi, who almost dropped her food. What are you doing? Qianyi gritted her teeth in irritation. Don't move, Shu Shang commanded, frozen in thought, pondering if she had something on her. Meanwhile, the scholar had already leaned over, shamelessly biting into the meat. Qianyi stood there, dumbfounded. In all her years, she had never encountered anyone so utterly shameless, with a face thicker than the bottom of a pot. Goodness, what kind of spirits are manifesting today? Qianyi gazed at the crescent moon in the sky, losing her appetite for the meat. Upon witnessing this, Shu Shang seized the chopsticks from her hand and began to sweep away the food. When Qianyi finally came to her senses, she found all her meat had vanished. What on earth are you here for? Qianyi felt too exhausted to even be angry. I already told you, I'm here to mooch off your food, he stated as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Qianyi lowered her head, pondering seriously for a moment, then said earnestly, Scholar, shouldn't you be watching your diet? Not at all. The sooner one dies, the sooner one is reborn, Shu Shang replied, his mouth dripping with grease. Ah, Qianyi held her head, feeling that her days of peace were numbered. On the following day, Shu Shang lay on the bed, waiting for food to be served, claiming he couldn't move much until he healed. On the third day, Qianyi practiced her swordplay while Shu Shang leaned by the window, creating a ruckus. On the fourth day, after having red date and longan soup, Qianyi went to sleep, only to be disturbed by Shu Shang's incessant chatter outside her window, which led her to drag him to the temple and toss him out. On the fifth morning, as Qianyi opened her eyes, she was met with Shu Shang's face, adorned with 2 dark circles, staring at her in a daze. What are you doing? She was startled by his early morning presence, grateful for her sturdy constitution. Last night someone sang all night long, Shu Shang lamented, tugging at her sleeve. Did you perhaps mishear? Qianyi asked hesitantly. Do you think I could mishear for an entire night? Shu Shang rubbed his eyes and yawned. I'm just going to rest here for a bit. By the time Qianyi looked over, he had already fallen asleep, mouth agape, snoring, clearly utterly exhausted. Qianyi smirked, thinking to herself that perhaps now it would finally be quiet. On the 6th day, Qianyi presented him with a wild chicken. Shu Shang, while eating his steamed bun, looked at her in astonishment. What is this for? A farewell gift, she said through gritted teeth. Oh, so you're sending me off. Shu Shang replied calmly. This bun is quite good, let me finish eating before I leave. Qianyi simply packed everything for him to take away. Hurry up and leave if you linger. This chicken will be your fate. Shu Shang glanced at the decapitated chicken, feeling a chill run down his neck. Can we negotiate?
No way, Chiba resolutely rejected. All right, Shu Shang, feeling a pang of sadness, carried the steamed bun and clutched the chicken as she departed. Chiba exhaled in relief, contentedly seated herself, and poured a cup of tea. However, before she could finish her tea, she heard a cry, Help! Save me! Shu Shang rushed in, screaming. Chiba sighed, rising to leap out of the kitchen window. She intended to hide for a while. Chiba, help! There's a spider, it's biting me! He cried out pitifully. Eventually, Chiba stepped outside, her patience wearing thin. Can you not be so noisy? Chiba, I've been poisoned. His tear-filled eyes looked more innocent than a little white rabbit. You look perfectly fine to me. Chiba approached him, examining him closely. She noticed his left hand had swollen considerably, turning a dark hue. Her expression shifted, her face paling as she seized his hand, swiftly untying her hairband to wrap it around his wrist, constricting the blood vessels. Then she produced a dagger, no longer than her index finger, and swiftly cut across into the swollen, darkened area, quickly forcing out the poisoned blood. Her long hair, freed from its binding, cascaded down, brushing against Xu Shang's cheek and simultaneously stroking his heartstrings. Tingling sensation coursed through him. Chiba crushed a pill and sprinkled it over the wound, then wrapped it with gauze. This is an antidote left by the master. Take one 3 times a day. Are you trying to drive me away again? He mumbled, looking down, his lips pressed together, his voice dull. Sensing his displeasure, Chiba refrained from asking why, instead taking up a cleaver and stating, "Let us go, while it's still early. I'll escort you." Oh! Xu Shang felt a flicker of joy, yet a greater sense of disappointment lingered. He couldn't quite grasp why his emotions were so tumultuous today. The journey was uneventful, and by the time they reached home, Xu Shang's hand had returned to normal. Observing someone turning to leave as soon as they reached the door, a surge of anger welled up within Xu Shang. He glared at the door. Feeling a fiery rage, bang! He kicked the door, which fell, and he cradled his foot in pain. In Chapter 31. Chiba turned around to see a certain fool hopping on one foot and wailing, with a pained expression. She approached him. "What now?" Her voice was filled with exasperation and fatigue. "I forgot my key, and in my panic, He looked at her with tear-filled eyes. Chiba feared he might burst into tears at any moment. It seemed this door was beyond repair. Perhaps it was time to replace it. "I have no time for this. I'm leaving, Chiba," someone called out from behind her. Turning back, she saw Xu Shang with a sorrowful expression. "Am I really that bothersome?" Sighing, she walked over and helped him inside. "You're simply lonely. Hurry and save up to propose to a wife." "Can you hit me?" he suddenly asked with utmost seriousness. "Why? Who asks to be hit?" "Because I suddenly wanted to kiss you." His gaze was intense, his voice huskier than before. Chiba was taken aback, then threw a punch at him. He doubled over, clutching his stomach, lying on the bed for quite some time without moving. Chiba was startled, immediately rushing over to check on him, worried she might have hit him too hard. "Scholar?" She leaned in, calling out, only to be suddenly pulled down and kissed on the lips. Her slightly parted lips were invaded. And Chiba's mind went blank, her eyes wide open, frozen in place. After what felt like an eternity, she finally reacted, shoving him away and bolting out. Thud! Xu Shang clutched the back of his head, wincing in pain. At the doorway, Chiba glared at the door, suddenly furious, and kicked it. Creak! The door was completely ruined. For several consecutive days, Xu Shang sat at the village's edge, not catching a glimpse of Chiba. He sighed, feeling desolate. One day, Chiba descended from the mountain, heading to an county to buy goods. Passing through the market, she suddenly encountered a commotion ahead. Approaching, she heard, "You hit someone and now want to leave with just an apology? Do you believe I can make you unrecognizable to your mother?" "I didn't hit him." The honest young man stammered in panic. "I saw with my own 2 eyes. Do you think I'm blind?" "Who da?" Rolling up his sleeves, angrily seized the young man's collar. Emma Dido, drenched in sweat, pleaded, "Sir, I truly didn't hit him." Oh. The man on the ground groaned, clutching his leg in agony. "He's lying on the ground." "And you claim you didn't hit him?" Huda pointed at the moaning man. The onlookers whispered among themselves. "This young man is in deep trouble. If he doesn't pay, they won't let him go." Huda is a notorious bully in an county. It's deadly. Even the officials won't intervene. Who would? They say he has connections with the constable. If the constable doesn't take action, who would bother? Chiba frowned, sensing a scam unfolding. She scoffed, preparing to say something when she noticed a scholar in a patched long gown carefully approaching them with a painting. "Hey, good sir, make way." He gently poked the people in front of him. Huda, ferociously demanding money from Ma Do, impatiently waved him off. "Get lost?" "No, you're blocking the way. If I want to leave, there's no way for me to do so." Xu Shang attempted to squeeze past. Relying on his slender frame, Huda was enraged, turning around to shove him, scolding, "Who is this poor scholar? Instead of focusing on your studies, you come here to stir up trouble." Xu Shang, bewildered, retorted, "You've blocked the road completely and still won't let anyone through. What sense does that make? Just because you're big, you think you're right? Hey, you bookworm, get out of my way." Huda cursed, pushing Xu Shang down to the ground, causing the painting to tumble from his hands. Ma Do instinctively moved to help him, only to accidentally kick the painting towards Huda's feet. Enraged, Huda stomped down, exclaiming, "What a piece of junk! Ah, my painting!" Xu Shang cried out, desperately lunging for it. But it was too late. The painting was ruined. You! He trembled with anger, grabbing Huda tightly. You owe me for my painting. Why would I compensate for a worthless painting? Huda scoffed. Oh, oh, oh. The man on the ground continued to wail in pain. Suddenly, Huda had a thought and began to grab Ma Do, say, will you compensate my brother for the damages? You compensate for my painting. Compensate. Shu Sheng shouted. Compensate your mother's backside. Huda shrugged him off. Good, good, you're a rogue. You ruin my painting and still insult me. Shu Sheng's eyes turned red with anger as he clutched Huda's sleeve, insisting they go to the magistrate. Let's go to the court and sort this out. I want to see if Magistrate Qin thinks you did well by stepping on it. Hey, let go, let go. Huda panicked, trying to shake him off. Ma Do, seeing Huda's fierce demeanor, hurriedly intervened, calling out, Scholar Shu, be careful not to get hurt. Ma Do, you're here too, Shu Sheng exclaimed, as if just noticing him. Come on, help me drag him to the magistrate. He must pay for my painting. What value does a worthless painting have? Huda derisively exclaimed, fist raised towards Ma Do, quickly give me 2 taels. This worthless painting is worth something. It was created by a jinsher, and the shopkeeper himself said it was worth 10 taels. I never wanted to sell it, and now it's ruined beneath your feet. Shu Sheng shouted angrily, pay up, or we go to the magistrate. 10 taels. Have you lost your mind over money? Huda mocked. Let's go to the court. Shu Sheng glanced around. Just wait. I'll write a complaint right now. You 3-1T escape. Shu Sheng pointed at Huda, Ma Do, and the man still groaning on the ground. Hey, this bookworm is serious. Huda felt a twinge of anxiety, and Ma Do was on the verge of tears, wondering which deity had cursed him today. He lamented, Scholar, you can't say that. It has nothing to do with me. If you hadn't kicked it, would he have stepped on it? I didn't mean to. Ma Do stammered, I don't care. Shu Sheng was furious, his hair seeming to smoke. You all owe me. Huda exchanged glances with the man on the ground. Realizing this young man was a scholar, the man's expression changed, and he spat on the ground in disdain, rising to leave. Meanwhile, Huda pushed Ma Do towards Shu Sheng, stating, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have stepped on it. Make him compensate. Then he turned to Ma Do, shouting, you, just pay him and forget about compensating me. Consider yourself lucky. With that, he fled the scene. Hey, don't run, Shu Sheng shouted. Ma Do, dumbfounded, exclaimed, didn't you just say your leg was broken? I think it's your leg that's broken. Shu Sheng was furious. What do we do now? He waved the ruined painting, his heart aching as if it were bleeding. Ma Do was on the verge of tears. Scholar Shu, I have no money. Then why don't you watch where you're going? Didn't I tell you to keep your eyes open? Shu Sheng glared at him with resentment before turning to leave. If you have no money, then come work for me. Hey, I'm strong. Upon hearing he wouldn't demand money, Ma Do felt pleased. As a farmer, he had plenty of strength. He walked away feeling lighter. After walking a considerable distance, Shu Sheng glanced back and saw a few passers-by on the empty street, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he had caught a glimpse of Chiba, but she vanished in the blink of an eye. He paused, feeling a deep emptiness in his heart, a sensation more painful than hunger itself. Scholar Shu, what are you staring at? Ma Do turned back to look. Nothing. He lowered his eyelids, gripping the painting tightly as he moved forward. In Langtu village, Ma Do was busy repairing a door for Shu Sheng, laboring in silence for half the day until he suddenly looked up and remarked, Scholar, are you intentionally helping me? Shu Sheng, squatting beside the door, cast a sidelong glance and retorted, I thought you might be too stubborn to accept help. Ha ha ha. Ma Do chuckled foolishly, his hammer swaying in his hand. Watching the hammer, Shu Sheng inwardly muttered, be careful. If you hit my hand, it would cost dozens of taels to compensate. Indeed, the scholar's hands are precious. Ma Do scratched his head and suggested, why don't you let go, and I'll manage it myself. After pondering for a moment, Shu Sheng stood up, saying, I'll hold it from the top, just don't smash my feet. Ma Do, speechless, replied, Shu Xiu Kai, can you not trust me? My work is just as good as your studies. This was a testament to Ma Do's good-natured temperament. Otherwise, he would have stormed off. Chapter 32. When the new door was finally installed, its sturdy construction offered a great sense of security. Shu Sheng pulled him into the kitchen and handed him a bowl of thin porridge. Next time you're out, Be mindful, especially in crowded places. Don't flaunt your silver, Deza hesitated. Are you saying they saw the 2 taels of silver on me? Well, why else would they demand exactly 2 taels and not a bit more or less? Ma Dezhou frowned. But this is the payment from my employer for today. It's for the materials, and I haven't even spin it yet. No wonder they insisted on it. Doesn't the magistrate care? The commoners don't raise issues unless there's a serious problem. That who seems to be the catchpole's nephew, Xu Shang, savoring a piece of candy, felt his mood lift considerably. Why are you holding the bowl? Why not drink it? Do you intend to take this porridge home? No, no. Ma Dezhou awkwardly laughed, gulping it down in a few hurried bites. I have a question for you. Has your mother found a wife for you yet? Xu Shang's gaze was piercing. Huh? Ma Dezhou chuckled nervously. Not yet. We have no silver at home. I'll save up. Ha! Xu Shang scoffed coldly. After finishing your work, you hand over all your silver to your mother. And she won't even spare enough to make you a new set of clothes. Dio, you really expect her to take the time to find you a wife? Ma Dezhou glanced at his patched-up clothes, fell silent for a moment, and replied, When I'm working, it's a waste to ruin good clothes. Xu Shang observed him thoughtfully. The Ma family was quite peculiar. One parent was overly shrewd, the other rather dull. And the eldest son, Ma Dezhou, was too honest, while Ma Xiaomai was quite slippery. Dezhou, don't think I'm trying to stir up trouble between you and your mother. Xu Shang spoke earnestly. Today, I saw your mother with Ma Xiaomai following an overly made-up old woman, claiming they were going to view a potential match. View a match for what? He was somewhat puzzled, though books could impart much knowledge. The ways of the world were beyond their teachings. Biting his lip, Ma Dezhou felt a surge of emotions. No wonder his mother had been acting mysteriously, speaking to Ma Xiaomai while deliberately avoiding him. He had assumed it was because his younger brother had gotten into trouble again, so he hadn't given it much thought, never imagining she intended to take Xiaomai to meet a girl. Anger welled up within him. He was nearly 20, yet his mother kept saying there was no rush and they had no money, while boys from the same village were already courting. It was likely that his mother was taking Xiaomai to meet a matchmaker. Ma Dezhou suppressed his frustration, saying, If that's the case, they will surely tell me when they return tonight. If they don't, how would you manage to get money from you? Xu Shang casually replied, pondering what matchmakers actually did. Are they responsible for making matches? Indeed. There are things you, scholar, might not be aware of. A matchmaker is essential for the formalities. After a few exchanges, Ma Dezhou felt that Xu Shang was unlike the other scholars from the academy, who often looked down upon others. Xu Shang nodded, mentally noting to keep some silver for himself instead of handing it all over. Deza hesitated and said, Scholar, can I trouble you with something? Xu Shang, deep in thought, lifted his chin and replied, Go on. Can I hide my silver with you? Ma Dezhou's eyes sparkled. Why? If I take it home without giving it to my mother, she will definitely search my room. It must be said that Ma Dezhou had accurately gauged his mother's intentions. There's a hole down there. You can hide it there yourself, but don't blame me if it goes missing. Your house doesn't even have mice. How could it possibly get lost? Xu Shang remarked with a smile. Although the Xu family had a well-built house, they had no provisions or land. Who would come to steal from them? For instance, your mother. Xu Shang quipped playfully. Ma Dezhou was left speechless. I have already warned her. If she intrudes again, I will accuse her of burglary, and she could end up in jail, Xu Shang said, wrinkling his nose in disgust. Before leaving, Ma Dezhou appeared hesitant to speak. Xu Shang raised an eyebrow and asked, What is it? Just say it. Is that painting really worth 10 taels of silver? He asked cautiously. Xu Shang fixed him with a steady gaze and burst into laughter. Indeed. Should I compensate you? Ma Dezhou, even more cautious, inquired, Do you think so? Xu Shang, in a good mood, raised an eyebrow in response. I suppose it shouldn't be necessary. Xu Shang smiled silently at him. In the end, as Ma Dezhou left, he felt a sense of unease, and upon reaching the doorway and gazing at the newly replaced door, he suddenly felt a flash of inspiration. Chuckling, indeed. Scholars love to frighten people. Meanwhile, Xu Shang abruptly sprang up and dashed to the study, rummaging through a large box until he finally found a flat box. He blew off the dust and pondered. When family, Yian County. Squatting on the ground, he carefully thought about where Yian County was located. Upon entering the Ma household, Ma Dezhou was immediately scolded by Aunt Ma. You blind fool. Can't you watch where you're going? 10 taels of silver. Does our family have that much? Her booming voice was deafening. Imadazu was taken aback and replied, Mother, what about the money I have given you over the years from my carpentry work? Bah, I have no money. Don't think about those funds. That is meant for Xiaomai's wedding, Aunt Ma stated with conviction. Imadazu looked at her in shock. Mother, am I not your son? Nonsense, you crawled out of my womb. Aunt Ma retorted, slapping him. Dazu didn't dodge, but simply stared blankly at her. Mother, I'm 19 this year, and Xiaomai is 17. You're busy marrying her off while ignoring me, Aunt Ma. Feeling guilty, averted her gaze. Isn't it because no one is interested in you? Have you even tried to help me? Ma Dazu shouted. It's not that we have no silver. Aunt Ma weakly defended herself. You have silver to make clothes for Xiaomai and to view potential brides, but there's none for me. Ma Dazu pressed. The eldest son, usually quiet and obedient, suddenly became aggressive, leaving Aunt Ma feeling both guilty and angry. I'll spend my silver however I wish. Aunt Ma shot back. Madazu calmed down. Realizing arguing was futile, he softened his tone. Fine. I have given you a lot of silver over the years. Just give me 10 taels, and I'll go to Scholar Shu. He looked at his mother hopefully. Even if she was biased, as long as it didn't go too far, he wouldn't make a scene. Hoping to keep the family harmonious, he understood that he might not be eloquent, but he was still her son. Aunt Ma seemed to waver, but just as she was about to speak, Ma Xiaomai approached and reproached. Brother, why did you make Mother angry? He affectionately wrapped his arm around his mother and smiled. Mother, don't be upset. I'll talk to him. Xiaomai, are you feeling dizzy? Aunt Ma asked with concern as Xiaomai stiffly forced a smile. I am fine, Mother. Just talk to brother nicely. Don't get angry. Today, on the street, he heard that his foolish brother had broken something belonging to Scholar Shu and would owe 10 taels. He knew his brother had no money and would come seeking their mother. But Aunt Ma had long been eyeing the silver mint for Xiaomai's wedding, unwilling to let anyone else take a share at it, so he had subtly instigated a few words and excused himself. Claiming a headache to go to bed, Dazu watched them, feeling like an outsider as they displayed their affectionate family dynamic. Aunt Ma straightened her back, feeling empowered by her younger son's affection. No, you figure it out yourself. Madaza said nothing, casting a glance at them before turning to leave. Mother, what 10 taels? Ma Xiaomai eagerly helped his mother sit at the kitchen table, pouring her a cup of hot water. As Aunt Ma drank, she remarked that the water tasted as if mixed with honey. Who knows if it's real? Where would that poor scholar get such expensive things from? They can barely afford to eat, yet they flaunt. Speaking of the Shu family, located not far from theirs, Aunt Ma was filled with disdain. He'll starve to death sooner or later. Ma Xiaomai hesitated, glancing at his mother's expression. So, Mother, you want to help brother? Aunt Ma was still somewhat hesitant, but seeing her attentive younger son, she firmly declared, no, let him sort it out himself. During dinner, as the family was finishing their meal, Madazu set down his bowl and addressed the quiet Ma Laotu. Father, do you know that Mother took Xiaomai to view a potential match? Ma Laotu put down his bowl and pulled out a stick he had tucked behind his back, cracking it menacingly. Didn't you say you were going to take Dazu? Well, they've taken a liking to Xiaomai. Aunt Ma's voice faltered. She knew she had overstepped, but she couldn't resist her younger son's affection. Chapter 33. I have heard that you owe Scholar Shu 10 taels of silver. Old man Ma turned to inquire. Indeed, that is the case, the scholar replied nonchalantly. My mother insists that there isn't a single coin to spare. So I intend to save the wages I earn for future work. That's a reasonable thought. One must be honest in life. Old man Ma nodded, noting, you are not a child anymore. It's best to save your silver for yourself. But father, that's not acceptable. Aunt Ma interjected anxiously. Have I not fed you? In the household, Old man Ma usually played the role of a passive observer. He either had no temper or possessed a stubbornness that could rival a bull. Once he made a decision, no one dared to oppose him, so he remained quietly steadfast, allowing Aunt Ma to voice her grievances. However, father, we truly have no silver. We must soon arrange a marriage for Xiaomai. So tell me, where has your silver gone? Old man Ma's meaning was clear. No silver? Fine, then let us discuss its whereabouts. But father, that silver is for our coffin. Do not speak nonsense. I am still immobile, waiting for someone to feed me. The old man rapped the table, sparks flying, startling Aunt Ma into a shudder. As Xiaomai remained obediently silent, not daring to utter a word. Go fetch 5 taels of silver. There isn't any. Aunt Ma raised her chin defiantly, her bravado returning. She felt a twinge of guilt towards her eldest son, but with Old Man Ma's words, her stubbornness flared up, declaring there was no silver. Old Man Ma calmly finished his smoke, then began to smash the table with his pipe. He was careful to strike only the table, as injuring someone would incur further expenses. Yet each thud sent sparks flying, making Aunt Ma jumpy-eye in the end. This farce concluded with Aunt Ma, disheveled and weary, producing 6 taels of silver. Why the extra tael? Old Man Ma explained it was because Aunt Ma had created too much commotion. He wanted her to remember this lesson. Go give it to Scholar Shu and inquire if it suffices. Old Man Ma puffed on his pipe, his weathered face etched with years of hardship and toil. Ma Daodu nodded and turned to leave. After a while, he returned with a peculiar expression, saying, "Father, what is it?" Old Man Ma's forehead creased with worry. "Is it insufficient?" He sighed, slowly stuffing more tobacco into his pipe. Resuming his smoking. "No, the scholar said he would like my help to renovate his house in a while. The remainder is unnecessary." "Well, that is splendid." Old Man Ma's face brightened. "The scholar only accepted 1 tael, refusing the rest. What is the reason?" "He suggested I save some for marrying a wife." Ma Daodu spoke somewhat bashfully. Old Man Ma nodded, falling silent. Though he appeared unassuming, he was acutely aware that Aunt Ma favored the youngest son. In his view, it wasn't a significant issue, but on matters of great importance, clarity was essential, and Ma Daodu fully understood this. That day, Shu Sheng struggled up the mountain, startled by every rustle of the wind, his legs trembling with fear. Upon finally reaching Shuangyan Mountain, he discovered that Qinya was absent. Instantly, disappointment washed over him, and he sank onto the ground. Has she gone out? He sat at the temple entrance, waiting, watching as dusk approached, yet Qinya still did not return. He wiped his face, his heart a tumult of emotions. Is she avoiding me? Qinya, Ming Qinya. He called out loudly from the stone steps. Qinya, Ming Qinya, Ming Qinya. The mountains echoed his cries, yet that person remained elusive. Night fell, the crescent moon hung high, and a cold wind swept through. He leaned against the temple door, slowly drifting into fatigue. Qinya, hidden in the shadows, watched the young man in exasperation, urging him to leave. "Why linger here?" she murmured, feeling a mix of joy and despair. Exhausted and weary, Shu Sheng suddenly lost his footing and tumbled down. "Help!" he flailed in panic, desperately trying to steady himself against the impending fall. Bang, bang, bang. Chinya's head ached further. How has he lived this long? She lunged out, grasped his belt, and pulled him back down. Shu Sheng's eyes lit up, and with a pout he complained. "Why did you take so long to return? Did you make me wait for ages?" Chinya turned away, her back to him. "I was delayed by some matters and returned late." Pushing open the door, she walked inside, feigning indifference. "Did you come to find me for something? Is that so?" Shu Sheng mumbled. "I thought you were deliberately avoiding me." Chinya pretended not to hear, and Shu Sheng also acted as though he had said nothing. Both harbored their own unrest, desperately pretending to be calm. "Are you free recently?" Shu Sheng approached her in the kitchen. "Nothing much." Chinya turned around, pouring herself a glass of water as she stood by the stove. "Would you accompany me on a trip?" Shu Sheng's eyes darkened as he moved closer, quietly observing her. Chinya tilted her head. "Where to? For what purpose?" "To Yayan County. You know I am not familiar with the route." Shu Sheng lowered his gaze, pursing his lips, his attention drawn to the moss clinging to Chinya's hem. The old temple, surrounded by stone walls, easily fostered such moss. "What prompted you to think of going there?" Her curious inquiry held no hint of emotion. He paused, resolutely stating, "It is my fiancée's home. There." "Oh." Chinya set down her cup. An unexpected wave of emotion crashed over her, invoking a desire to weep despite having done nothing wrong. She lifted her cup but let her hand fall helplessly 3 times before finally managing to sip. "Shu Sheng, will you accompany me? Please, I have something to attend to," Chinya replied coolly. "You know I am unfamiliar with the route. If I go alone, I may not find my way back." Shu Sheng fixed his gaze on her. "We can discuss it later," Chinya replied dismissively. "Weren't you always saying I should marry early?" Shu Sheng suddenly closed in on her, his tone assertive. Chinya turned away but was pinned by his grip on her shoulder. "You are avoiding me." Shu Sheng felt a tightness in his chest. "Yes," Chinya unexpectedly admitted. Hurt flickered in Xu Shang's eyes. The girl before him was candid and bright, yet resisted his approach. Then, accompany me just this once. After we return, if you do not wish to see me again, I shall take my leave willingly. These few words were difficult for him to articulate, laden with meaning. Xu Shang, Qinya suddenly called out seriously, a rare earnestness in her voice, striking him with a dull ache. I owe you nothing. This statement felt more like a declaration, a prelude to an impending farewell. Who said that? You still owe me 3 meals. Do you not? He spoke in a flurry, clutching her hand, his expression nearly pleading. Qinya sighed. You are clever enough to know what I mean. Qinya, he attempted to explain, but she interrupted him. Fine, I will accompany you this once. Her eyes were resolute, her tone decisive, as if she were placing everything on the line. Xu Shang stared at her in astonishment, suddenly feeling a twinge of regret. Qinya no longer wished to hear his words. Turning and stepping outside, leaving Xu Shang to stand forlornly in the kitchen, gazing at the darkened sky, silently wishing. I only hope that this journey goes smoothly. Chapter 34. Yian County lies adjacent to Tanxiang County. To the east of An County, the journey from An County to Tanxiang County takes nearly 2 days, while the trip from Tanxiang County to Yian County requires an additional day's journey. Of course, this is based on Qinya's pace. If calculated by Xu Shang's, it would take at least 2 days longer. To facilitate their travels, Xu Shang specifically rented a donkey cart, and the two set off on their journey. Qinya circled the donkey cart, remarking, You have thought this through quite well, naturally, Xu Shang replied with a smile, gracefully lifting his garment and climbing onto the cart's shaft, then patting the seat beside him. Come up. Qinya glanced at him nonchalantly. Can you drive a donkey cart? Xu Shang's smile faltered, his actions stilled, and he looked at her with anticipation. Can you? Logically speaking, she shook her head, honestly replying, no. The two exchanged glances, locked in a stalemate for a quarter of an hour, before Xu Shang hesitantly suggested. Is it too late to learn now? That depends on your talent, Qinya observed him meaningfully. This skill was akin to martial arts. Once one grasped the trick, they could even run. Thus, Xu Shang took the whip and struck down hard, causing the donkey to bolt, its hooves flying as it galloped wildly. Ah, Qinya, help! Xu Shang nearly got thrown out, clinging desperately to the cart's shaft, terrified that a moment's inattention would result in a serious injury. Qinya watched calmly as he was dragged around for several spins. By the time the cart finally came to a halt, he had fainted from exhaustion. Qinya crouched before him, her gaze fixed. The once pale and haggard scholar no longer seemed unappealing. Why not just study your books? Why climb mountains or trees? Oh dear, Xu Shang grimaced, struggling to rise while groaning. Qinya, what were you murmuring about? I was wondering how you could be so useless. She stood up, coldly mocking him. Xu Shang stiffened, dejectedly lowering his head to once more lie on the ground. I see others whip the reins and take off. Who would have known it would turn out like this? It must be the donkey's fault, he asserted fervently. Qinya nodded solemnly. It must be a case of incompatible zodiac signs. Are you praising it or scolding me? Xu Shang propped himself up halfway, preparing to rise, only to lift his head and find the donkey's face staring back at him, its big eyes blinking curiously. Qinya, it won't bite, right? Xu Shang felt a bead of sweat trickle down. Qinya paused. It shouldn't, right? I've never heard of a donkey eating human flesh with a puff, she exclaimed. Go away, come here. Xu Shang blew air, attempting to send it away. The donkey, however, seemed quite pleased by the breeze, stretching its face in a somewhat contented manner. Qinya could hardly suppress a smile, biting her lip as she approached, tugging the stiff rope, while the donkey leisurely followed her. Xu Shang, rising to her feet, complained, You could at least help me instead of just standing there. Qinya, with her brows lowered and lips pressed together, focused her gaze on the donkey, retrieving a carrot from her sleeve pocket to feed it, which made the donkey swish its tail and munch happily. Ignoring him intentionally, Xu Shang felt a pang of frustration, stepping forward to push Qinya aside, pointing at the donkey while reproaching, Why are you ignoring me? Don't you know I paid you with my hard-earned money? He shouted, Believe it or not, I could stew you and make donkey meat buns out of you. The donkey, with its adorably clueless face, gazed back at him innocently. Qinya, standing idly by, suddenly remarked nonchalantly, Donkey meat buns are quite delicious. As she spoke, her eyes glimmered with a golden sunlight, rendering her strikingly beautiful. Shusheng looked up, momentarily entranced, murmuring, "I didn't know. I only heard." Though her features were merely ordinary, they possessed a delicate charm that was utterly captivating, causing his heart to race in a rhythmic cadence. Thump, 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 thump. As they wobbled down the path, Shusheng leaned against the cart door and inquired, "Chinya, do you know the way?" "Not at all," she replied rather curtly. Shusheng was taken aback. What was the point of having a mouth under her nose if she didn't know the way? He felt conflicted, watching her steer the donkey cart in a crooked manner. Tempted to leap off, yet, he pondered whether voicing such sentiments would seem overly dramatic, considering he had almost collided moments ago. Thus, they clumsily set forth on their journey. In Panja village, the village chief, Pan Wei, was seen walking out with the clan elder, supporting him while advising, "Uncle, do you need me to escort you back?" "No, I'm not that old yet." The elder waved his hand dismissively, adding, "Just remember what I told you. Don't disturb the village's feng shui." The elder grimaced in disdain, as if even speaking of it was an ill omen. I noted it down," the village chief responded repeatedly, waiting until the elder was out of sight before turning back inside and spitting onto the ground. "What a nuisance, making me do such distasteful tasks, thinking I would benefit from it. Dinner's ready, father," the eldest daughter-in-law called out, emerging from the kitchen with a plate of dishes. The village chief nodded sternly before sitting down at the dining table, where the youngest daughter-in-law promptly poured wine for him and arranged the chopsticks. The village chief's wife brought a plate of meat dishes and placed it before him, exclaiming, "Why not keep uncle here for a meal before he leaves?" After a few exchanges, she accepted the bowl from her daughter-in-law and sat down, offering a chopstick full of stir-fried meat to the village chief while inquiring, "Have you called for Xiao?" The youngest daughter-in-law hastily replied, "Yes, I called her, but she said she hasn't finished embroidering yet, so she won't come for dinner." After giving birth to 2 sons, the village chief's wife cherished her daughter, treating her like a precious jewel. Even the usually stern village chief would smile a little when seeing his little girl. "How can this child skip a meal?" The village chief's wife hurriedly prepared a bowl of rice, while the youngest daughter-in-law kindly suggested, "Mother, you've been busy all morning. Sit down and rest. I'll take food to Xiao." Satisfied with her daughter's thoughtfulness, the village chief's wife glanced at the eldest daughter-in-law, who was silently eating her meal. Her eyes flickering with displeasure, she thought, lacking discernment and family background, and just as she was about to say something, her gaze fell upon the slightly bulging belly and she swallowed her words. As long as she could bear a son, that would suffice. Meanwhile, the youngest daughter-in-law silently cursed within. Her sister-in-law truly thought of herself as a young lady, claiming that embroidery was more important than eating. "What did Xiao's father say?" the village chief's wife inquired. "What else could he say? He asked me to handle it." The village chief was irked. What is wrong with this family? They seem to bring nothing but trouble. The village chief's wife scoffed, bringing that scoundrel back. Do they not fear ruining the village's feng shui? The village chief frowned but did not admonish her, indicating he shared her sentiment. He merely found it unbecoming for his wife to speak such words. They needed to hurry and have them thrown out. Otherwise, what would outsiders think if they found out? I shall go tomorrow. But tomorrow? Weren't you supposed to go to the county town to check the announcements? Right. I did mention that. The village chief recalled. I need to consult the village head about this year's Corvée labor regulations. Luckily, this matter was not urgent. Corvée labor was a significant issue. He pondered while swirling his wine cup. Not urgent. Our Xiao is about to be betrothed. With such a situation in the village, she grimaced, what would the in-laws think of us or of our Xiao? Father of Xiao, you must pay attention. The village chief's wife was also somewhat worried that Pan family's 5th son was as pretty as a flower, fearing he might spoil her daughter's prospects. They needed to act quickly to get rid of him. If they couldn't, it would be embarrassing for her to step outside. This was indeed a significant matter. The village chief felt a sense of pride in his little girl's upcoming union. After dinner, I will go. And that Pan family's 5th son, he won't do either. Just look at that gaze, the way he walks, there's nothing proper about him. Why is it that every time she returns, something goes wrong? Back then, it was the same. The moment she was born, everything went downhill. It took her mother 2 years to conceive again. Enough. You've been rambling nonstop during dinner. The village chief slammed the table in anger. He scolded, but inside he was mulling over the situation. Since Pan family's fifth son returned, the village's young men had been stirring up quite a ruckus. Moreover, he always felt something was off about the injuries of Pan Tai and Pan Dagui. But the clan elder forbade him from mentioning it again, so he let it slide. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Dingen was a bit uncanny. Chapter 35 at the Pan family. They were having their meal. A large pot of porridge served as the entire family's lunch. Pan Dachuan first fed his son, then served 2 bowls of porridge. Dingen, witnessing this, scoffed, "Eldest sister, do you think we have an abundance of grain?" Pan Dachuan sighed helplessly. "What else can we do? We can't let anyone starve." Regrettably, an eye for an eye. If not, I would have long since dealt with them. Dingen spoke harshly about her father and brother. Startling Pan Dakan my ancestor, "Do behave yourself." Pan Dachuan quickly glanced outside, checking for passers. "If you don't want to see them, just don't go. Don't say such harsh words. It doesn't reflect well on your reputation." "Reputation? Do we sisters still have any reputation left?" Dingen fixed her gaze on her, her stubborn expression evoking sympathy. "It's just bad luck for us. Remember to be born as a boy in the next life." Pan Dachuan sighed, holding her bowl, preparing to leave, but Dingen stopped her, saying, "As long as we're not starving, there's no need for such punctual feeding." After saying that, she poured a bowl for Pan Dachuan and took one for herself. "I'm off to check on second sister." Speaking of Pan family's second daughter, Pan Dongdong, the eldest sister couldn't help but shed tears. Dingen found her crying irksome, as she would often say, "Save those tears for when second sister passes." Those afflicted with such diseases rarely survived, especially if it dragged on. It was a miracle that Pan Dongdong had lasted this long. "Sister, it's time to eat," she called from the doorway, waiting a moment for the sound of dragging footsteps to approach. As if someone were dragging their feet on the ground. "Sister, I've brewed some medicine for you. Wash up later," Dingen smiled, even though she knew the person behind the door was engulfed in a foul odor. She felt no aversion whatsoever. "Don't. It's a waste of money," Pan Dongdong weakly protested. "Being able to die at home, rather than rotting in the wilderness, is already a blessing." "Second sister, stop talking about death," Dingen urged. "The king of hell might not even want to remember you, little sister. Keep your distance." Pan Dongdong leaned against the door, blocking Ding An's attempt to push it open. "It's fine, sister. I've recited so many scriptures before the Buddha. Surely, I will be blessed." Dingen blinked, swallowing her tears. Yet, upon hearing this, Pan Dongdong could only laugh, and as she laughed, tears streamed down her face. "Don't be foolish." In the dark room, she softly said, "There is no Buddha in this world. If there were, surely they wouldn't bless people like us." This statement was laden with bitterness and sorrow. "Sister, you must take care of yourself." Dingen squeezed her hand through the narrow gap in the door. Feeling only bones, Pan Dongdong instinctively recoiled, murmuring, "Dirty. Not dirty, not dirty. How could my sister be dirty?" Dingen replied tearfully with a smile, "Sister, you eat first. I'll come collect the bowl later." Dingen cast a cold glance at the front yard. In the front yard, the village chief, tall and imposing, sat there, frowning impatiently. "Can you stop crying? It makes it seem as though I'm the one bullying you." Pan Dachuan remained silent, her head down, covering her face and sobbing quietly. No matter what he said, she just cried. The village chief had anticipated his visit. Dingen had previously suggested, "Sister, you aren't good with words and can't win arguments. Just cry when someone says something. Don't worry about anything else, just cry." "You sisters, I have no objections, but you must get rid of that one," the village chief said sternly. "What did the village chief say? I didn't quite catch that." Dingen approached, mockingly sneering, "Our yard is filthy. The ground is dirty. Don't dirty your shoes. Stop with your sarcastic remarks." The village chief snapped, his temper flaring. "I'm telling you, get her out of here." Dingen gazed at him. Silently, Pan Dachuan's sobs grew louder. The village chief felt his face redden. Having such a person in the village will surely ruin the feng shui for everyone. What has she done? "My sister is not willing." Dingen erupted in fury, exclaiming, "When she was sold back then, why did you not intervene? It is clearly not her fault. Why did you not seek to eliminate Pan Tai? She has so little time left. Do you not possess even a shred of compassion? You?" The village head had never encountered anyone bold enough to retort him thus. It was merely her ill fate. Who should she blame? Ha! If the feng shui is truly corrupted, then it is your misfortune as well. Do not blame others, for it signifies that you are destined to face tribulation. You are disobedient and unfilial. To speak back to your elders, the village head raised his hand, itching to slap her several times. Dingen chuckled coldly. If you have the courage, then do strike me. If you dare to hit me today, I shall hang myself at your doorstep tomorrow. Your daughter has secured a fine match. Has she not? Are you forcing us to vacate our home for her marriage? Is your daughter's life worth more than that of my sister? The village head regarded her with disdain. Though unspoken, his meaning was clear. How could they compare to his precious daughter? They were akin to pearls embedded in a shoe versus the muck on its sole. As for you, I care not for the rest. In 3 days, either she departs or all of you must leave. Why must we leave? Pandachuan stammered through tears. It is because some find us intolerable, or rather, they covet our courtyard. Dingen maliciously slandered. The village head was so furious his heart ached. Do not be unreasonable. Unreasonable? Dingen nearly laughed aloud. With no way to survive, how can one speak of reason? You know full well that if my sister and I are driven out, we shall meet a dire fate. Why must you be so cruel? I did not force you to leave. Simply expel Pan Dong Dong, the village head asserted, feeling as though he possessed the heart of a bodhisattva. Pa, Dingen mocked, if I were capable of casting her out, I would not have brought her back. Look at you all, appearing dignified while your conscience has been gnawed away by dogs. In her case, we sympathize, but you cannot disregard the entire village for her sake. The village head forced himself to remain calm, but Dingen would not grant him that opportunity. If your daughter were in her shoes, would you expel her too? Nonsense. My Chow would never find herself in such a situation. That is because you have not sold your daughter. Look at your Chow. She is so pretentious and delicate, truly believing herself to be a young lady of distinction, yet her fate is uncertain. You? Kind words may be hard to accept, village head, but do not raise a daughter with such lofty aspirations, lest the village head was nearly driven to the brink of collapse by her sharp tongue. Ultimately, he departed, seething, declaring that Pan Dong Dong must leave. Observing his retreating figure, Pan Dachuan, with her voice hoarse from weeping, expressed her concern. Fifth sister, you have angered the village head. What now? Dingen retorted. Should we not chase him away? Only to bow and scrape for his reprimands. If he is not driven away, then second sister need not leave, right? Then why did you involve Pan Xiao? Pandachuan disagreed. Why mention her at all? Sister, Dingen gazed at her earnestly. Previously, Chinya remarked that I was foolish and naive. Huh? Pandachuan gasped in surprise. Chinya? The girl from last time? What happened to her? This time, I finally understand the sentiment behind her words. Pandachuan looked bewildered. Dingen laughed, annoyed. Do not assume everything, all right? The clan elders will undoubtedly demand second sister's departure, yet he is cunning enough not to make it so undignified. As for the village head, his daughter has secured a fine match, and he finds second sister an eyesore. How do you know Pan Xiao has secured a good match? Pandachuan questioned. I have not seen you leave the house. Hee sister, do you not recall a few days ago when Pan Xiao came to visit? Did she not say she was here to see you? Where is she? She informed me she had found a fine match. Destined to be a young mistress served by others. Unlike me, who possesses a pretty face but whose fate is wretched, Dingen sneered. Yet Pan Xiao's gaze upon me was as if she wished to pierce me with daggers. Why is she so malicious? Pandachuan exclaimed in anger. Second sister has only returned for 3 days, and already the village is rife with gossip. Are you suggesting that it was Pan Xiao who saw something? Thus, Pandachuan could not believe it. But Pan Xiao seems so gentle and compliant. How could her heart be so vicious? I suspected they could not tolerate second sister, but I never anticipated that they would come rushing in so soon after her return. What shall we do? Pandachuan fretted. Perhaps you should return to Nyo family village with me, and then be driven out again. You would not gain any good reputation either, Dingen countered. If they cannot tolerate those of the same ancestry, how can they accept those from different lineages? This struck a painful chord, and Pandachuan could not comprehend why Pan Dong Dong, who had been quietly hiding at home, was still unwelcome. The sun hung high, casting a dizzying glare. Shu Sheng lounged in the cart, bearing a woeful expression. Chinya, are we not there yet? Not yet. Chinya, vexed by the sun, finally leaned back, allowing the donkey to proceed on its own, for it was but a single path. And as long as it did not veer into a ditch, all would be well. Ouch, Chinya. My back hurts, came a complaint from within. Hearing this, Chinya's temper flared. Well, my backside hurts too. Xu Shang considered this, realizing he was jolted uncomfortably in the cart. Let alone Chinya, who sat outside in the heat. I'll give you a massage, he offered, his guilt compelling him to extend a hand. Without hesitation, Chinya retaliated with a punch. Xu Shang, too weary to evade, could only weakly protest. Heroine, violence is not the solution. Silence, she scolded, lowering her head to examine the map Xu Shang had drawn before their departure, noting, there should be an inn ahead where we can take a brief respite. Really? Xu Shang's face lit up with excitement as he sprang up to sit outside. He looked around, only to see trees and grass, with nothing else in sight. You are not deceiving me, are you? He lamented, feeling exhausted, hungry, sore, and cramping. How would I know? It is depicted plainly on the map. She shook the map, feeling her patience waning. Xu Shang sighed heavily, the blazing sun making it difficult to keep his temper in check. Fine, I shall be magnanimous and overlook this. Chapter 36. The donkey cart trudged forward, flanked by increasingly dense trees and grass, with distant fields visible. After a mile or two, they would reach the inn. Chinya took a sip of water, finally able to enjoy a proper rest. The evening breeze was cooler than the midday heat, pleasantly caressing their faces. Xu Shang squinted against the light, leaning against the cart while casually chewing on a blade of grass. Appearing quite leisurely, Chinya, Xu Shang suddenly changed his expression, sitting upright and nudging her. Look, is that not a person? What? Chinya looked in confusion. Where? She saw nothing. Under that tree, the one hanging, indeed. Chinya tossed the reins aside, stepping lightly from the cart like an arrow loosed from its bow. Wow! Xu Shang exclaimed. Heroine, do you take apprentices? Perhaps one to warm your bed? As she flew past, she plucked a leaf, and with a flick of her finger, it spun through the air like a blade, severing the rope, causing the hanging person to drop straight down. Chinya gracefully caught them and assessed the situation. Gray hair, an aged face, a gaunt body, and clothes that had faded to a pale hue. Meanwhile, Xu Shang struggled to park the cart before rushing over, breathless. How is it? Are they dead? Chinya shot him a glare, pushing him aside. You are blocking the light. Oh, Xu Shang, feeling wronged, stepped aside. Elder? Chinya pinched the old person's philtrum. Xu Shang squatted nearby, peering in. Is there still breath? The old person struggled to catch their breath, choking. Chinya gently applied her palm to their chest, performing light taps. With your strength, be gentler. Do not crush them. Xu Shang protested. Do not test my patience, all right? Oh, cough, cough. The old lady, Jin, coughed and opened her eyes, squinting against the harsh light, tears streaming down her face. Someone gently helped her up. Elder, are you all right? A plump girl asked with concern. Behind her, a poor scholar peeked in curiously. I am fine. I am fine. Elder Jin waved her hand unsteadily, wiping her tears. Thank you all. She then gathered her belongings and wobbled away, leaving Chinya and Xu Shang staring at her retreating figure in confusion. What just happened? Xu Shang asked. I do not know, Chinya replied. The two turned to continue their journey, but suddenly Xu Shang halted, grabbing Chinya and anxiously saying, she will not go hang herself again, will she? Surely not. Chinya could not believe that someone who had attempted to end their life once would try again. But I just saw her take the hanging rope with her, which means she is preparing to find another place to try again. Heroine, do not delay. Oh, indeed, from a distance of several paces, they saw the old woman standing atop a stone, preparing to throw the rope over a tree branch. Chinya felt perplexed. If she wishes to die so much, should we save her? Xu Shang was taken aback, blinking her eyes. To just walk away, can you truly live with yourself? It seems you cannot. She placed a hand over her heart. Then it settled. Regardless of the circumstances, we must secure a rescue first, Xu Shang suggested. When Lady Jin was rescued for the second time, she was on the brink of collapse. Yet, it was evident that she was trying to restrain herself. Without uttering a word, she stood up and continued forward with the rope in hand. Excuse me, Elder. Are you still contemplating hanging yourself? Qianyi questioned her bluntly, seizing her arm. Miss, please, just leave me be, I beg you. Lady Jin cried. Both women were utterly bewildered. Was the rescued pleading for mercy from her saviors? Elder, what troubles you so deeply? Please, do not torment yourself further. Qianyi attempted to dissuade her. Miss, I implore you. Please do not concern yourself with me. Lady Jin wiped her tears, her eyes filled with despair. Elder, at your age, death is inevitable. Why hasten to seek Yama for tea? Qianyi spoke the harsh truth, unable to comprehend why this elderly woman seemed so eager for death. Where is your compassion in your approach? If the situation had been different, Xu Sheng would have burst into laughter. Then you take the lead. Qianyi stepped back. Elder, whatever burdens you carry, suicide is not the answer. If you perish, what will become of your family? What of your husband and son? Xu Sheng grasped the rope tightly, unwilling to let go. Given your age, surely you have grandchildren. Could you truly abandon them? Upon hearing this, Lady Jin wept even more violently. I have wronged them. I have wronged them all. Elder, all matters can be discussed. Why choose this path? Xu Sheng gently urged. Qianyi took a swig from her water pouch, quenching her thirst, while Xu Sheng swallowed hard, feeling increasingly parched, glancing at her expectantly. After taking a hearty drink, Qianyi handed the pouch to Xu Sheng and approached Lady Jin, gathering her breath before spitting a mouthful of water at her. Lady Jin was taken aback, wide-eyed with shock, drenched in water. Xu Sheng's eyes widened in astonishment, almost comical. Feeling calm now? Qianyi asked with remarkable composure. Yes, Lady Jin nodded after a moment of shock. Good. Since you are calm, do you still wish to die? Qianyi scrutinized her coldly. Although I am unaware of the situation, should you attempt to take your life again, we will not come to your aid. If someone at home is waiting for you, let them seek you out in Yama's realm. Xu Sheng once more experienced Qianyi's sharp tongue. Truly, she simply preferred to remain silent. Just as Xu Sheng was about to speak, she was seized again. What more is there to say? No matter how you try to save her, you cannot save someone who is determined to die. If you wish to die, do so swiftly and find a suitable place. We will not be collecting your corpse. It was evident that Qianyi was exceedingly angry, teetering on the edge of a furious outburst. Xu Sheng observed the redness forming around her eyes, her lips pressed tightly together, her brows furrowed in distress. He grasped her hand tightly, squeezing it gently. She is not Mingjing Shirtai. Thus, there is no need for you to be this furious. After a prolonged silence, she finally murmured, I understand. The self-imposed exile of Mingjing Shirtai struck a chord with Qianyi. The woman, akin to a mother, finally breathed a sigh of relief, collapsing under the weight of her burdens. Weary and tormented, despite her understanding, she still felt a sense of grievance, a grievance magnified and compressed after the departure of Master Korwa. What good would words do? You are no longer a child. Hence, they felt secure enough to depart. Yet she wished to remain a child forever, free from the burdens of adulthood. Xu Sheng watched her, biting her lip in silence, feeling an ache for her. Qianyi? Perhaps death is merely another beginning. Without death, how can there be life? Perhaps Mingjing Shirtai believes she has aged and thus seeks a rebirth. Qianyi blinked, dispelling the mist from her eyes, shooting a glance at him. You may cease your incessant chatter. If you cannot provide comfort, then do not force it, all right? Do not make everyone uncomfortable. I was merely concerned for your distress. Xu Sheng murmured in explanation. I will not express gratitude. Your attempts at consolation are utterly dismal, she retorted, acknowledging his intent but feeling no gratitude. Wait, both of you. Lady Jin proclaimed that she had come to her senses and would not proceed with her plans to hang herself. Qianyi turned, unable to resist a jab at her. What is it? Have you come to terms with it? Or do you still seek a suitable place for your demise? Lady Jin wiped her eyes and said, In my long life, I have never seen two children so calm. Everyone can be muddled at times. It merely takes someone willing to lend a hand. Xu Sheng assisted her as they walked toward the official road. With Qianyi leading the way, her ears perked up. Old lady, I thank you for awakening me with your scolding. Otherwise, I would have made a foolish decision. Lady Jin patted her gratefully. The two soon found a donkey cart. Preparing to head to the inn, Xu Sheng helped Lady Jin settle into the cart, then turned to sit outside, inquiring, Grandmother, what brought you here to consider hanging yourself? Lady Jin remained silent for a moment before an expression of sorrow filled her eyes as she choked out. At home, My old man and little grandson fell ill, and I lost the silver. Lady Jin's family name was Qin, her husband named Chun Mingsheng, and they had a modest savings. However, the Chun family had followed a single lineage for 3 generations. She had only given birth to one son, who in turn had only one grandson. Not long ago, her husband and grandson fell ill with a mysterious ailment, and hearing of a skilled doctor in this region who could treat such afflictions, the family rushed here. She stayed behind to sell their land and house, intending to bring the silver to them. They had said that the treatment would require a substantial amount of silver. So she and her son decided it was best for them to take her husband and grandson for treatment, first while she sold the land and hurried to join them. As it stands, I sold all I could, thinking as an old woman, no one would miss me, so I traveled alone. As she spoke, tears streamed down Lady Jin's face once more, her voice breaking. Last night, I stayed at the inn, and when I awoke this morning, the silver was gone. That was the life-saving money for my husband and grandson. They were all depending on that silver for survival. Now that I've lost it, how can I face them? Lady Jin cried, struggling to catch her breath. Mysterious ailment? Qianyi scratched her head, feeling an itch, while Xu Sheng observed closely, noticing a thorn lodged in her scalp. She reached out to remove it, but Qianyi tilted her head away. Is there any more? None. Xu Sheng rubbed her hand and was met with a glare. After a moment, Lady Jin gradually ceased her tears, saying, in just one night, my belly swelled alarmingly. I could not eat anything, even water would cause me to vomit. Chapter 37. Did you perhaps consume something unsuitable? Xu Sheng gestured, feeling that the sudden swelling was a bit far-fetched. Qianyi frowned in deep thought. This ailment sounds oddly familiar, a distended belly akin to a woman in labor. She mimicked the gesture, feeling as though she had heard it somewhere before. Indeed, my son heard that there is a renowned doctor in Tanxiang County who can treat this illness. So he and his wife took my husband and grandson there. I wonder how they are faring. Lady Jin's face was etched with worry, unsure of how to face them upon their return. As she spoke, she wiped her eyes with her sleeve. The inn? Qianyi muttered, her gaze falling upon the inn in sight. Is this the one? Yes, yes. Lady Jin nodded eagerly. Xu Sheng, however, felt a twinge of confusion. The innkeeper. Does he not care? He had asked everyone, yet no one admitted to anything. Lady Jin had pleaded in the hall for the previous night's lodgers, but unfortunately, no one was willing to respond. The old woman had momentarily lost her way and had staggered here alone, contemplating her demise. How many people were there? Qianyi parked the cart, her fingers clenched in anger. There was a silk vendor, a peddler, and a couple headed back to the wife's family home, and the innkeeper. Aside from that, there was no one else. Lady Jin counted thoughtfully on her fingers. Including the innkeeper, that makes only 5. Qianyi remarked, her expression fierce. Xu Sheng recognized the determination on her face and quickly grasped her arm. Heroine, remain calm. Violence will not resolve this. Who said that? I could resolve this right now. Qianyi shot him a disdainful glance. Xu Sheng gulped, yet he did not release his grip. Heroine, even if they may outwardly comply, their hearts may resist. What if they report you to the authorities, claiming you conspired to rob them? The thought made him melancholic, envisioning Qianyi rampaging through the streets, followed by himself languishing in prison. All right, you make a fair point. So what do you propose we do? Qianyi regarded him skeptically. After pondering for a moment, he replied in truth, identifying the thief should not be difficult. Young man, do you have any inkling as to who stole my wife's money? Lady Jin grabbed his hand excitedly. I have a pretty good idea. As long as we head over shortly, we should find out. That's wonderful. If we manage to retrieve it, you will be my family's benefactor. Lady Jin exclaimed with gratitude, repeatedly chanting prayers. Is that so? Qianyi looked at him with suspicion. He shrugged nonchalantly. If that's the case, we still have you. Heroine, humph. Qianyi scoffed, though a smile began to tug at the corners of her mouth. At the entrance of the post station, the station master was in a fluster, beads of sweat dotting his forehead. The emaciated vendor selling silk, squatting nearby, gazed anxiously at the sky and exclaimed, I implore you. Sir, please let me leave. I have a delivery deadline to meet. Contrarily, the seller of powdered goods remained unperturbed, remarking that without clarity on the situation, leaving would only suggest guilt. What nonsense, am I guilty? I have not a heart of stone to steal someone else's life savings. The vendor retorted, his voice laced with irritation. This is all my hard-earned money. If I am delayed, you shall compensate me. A couple sat nearby, quietly savoring a plate of rice cakes, their attire worn and unkempt. Yet, surprisingly, their eyes bore an earnestness. The station master, in a fit of exasperation, tugged at his beard and glared. Enough of your incessant prattle. With a person missing, if a tragedy occurs, none of you shall escape the consequences. Hey, if she is dead, how can you blame us? We didn't take it. The vendor protested vehemently. It's definitely one of you. The station master pointed accusingly at them, his gaze scrutinizing each face, all of which feigned innocence. Making him appear the most culpable, sir, called out an elderly lady. I have returned. The station master hurried over, visibly relieved. Madam, you're back. I feared you might have taken a drastic step. The old lady, slightly embarrassed, admitted. I took a stroll and encountered my nephew and niece. I was hoping they could assist me in locating my silver. She spoke hesitantly, and the station master, understanding her intent, gestured behind him. There they are. Investigate as you see fit. Just inform me of the outcome. Chinya entered, assessing the situation with keen eyes. The flustered station master, the anxious vendor, the indifferent seller of goods, and the silent couple. Aunt, please recount the events once more. I slept in the innermost room last night. Turning in quite early. I did hear some commotion next door but was too exhausted to pay much attention, the elderly lady recalled. Where was the silver kept? Chinya inquired, pressing for the critical detail. It was beneath my pillow, she replied, her complexion wan and her spirit weary. Chinya assisted her to a seat, his keen gaze sweeping over the gathered individuals, suspecting each one. Quickly, if there are questions, ask them now. I must be on my way, the vendor urged impatiently. The seller of goods, standing a few steps away, busied himself with his wares, mockingly commenting, feeling guilty, are we? What did you say? The vendor, incensed, rolled up his sleeves. Ready to confront him, you, with your oily hair and powdered face. What nonsense are you spouting? I've long found you disagreeable. The seller retaliated with a punch, and the vendor responded with a kick. They grappled fiercely, the onlookers wide-eyed in shock. Chinya, concerned about the escalating violence, asked, Is this safe? Station master. Aren't you going to intervene? The station master, arms crossed, casually remarked, As long as they don't kill each other, I'm indifferent. His own irritation flared. Why must his post station devolve into a courtroom? Do you two know each other well? The animosity runs deep. Shushing inquired with interest. The seller of goods, clutching the vendor's hair, growled, Get off me. Who the hell knows you? The vendor, equally determined, held onto the seller's hair, both grimacing in pain, neither willing to relent. Shushing observed the brawl for a moment before shifting his gaze to the quiet couple. Have you discerned anything? The station master crouched beside him, and Shusheng nodded in affirmation. Chinya nudged him from behind, urging, If you've figured it out, speak quickly. I'm famished. Oh. Shusheng rose, straightening his attire, clearing his throat. Station master, last night. Did they share a room? Indeed, the station master replied, astonished. The inn had many vacant rooms, yet they opted to share to save on expenses. The room rate was not exorbitant. What was the arrangement of their rooms? The station master asked. The elderly lady, the couple, then those two, he replied, disdain evident in his tone. Oh? So the couple's trunk was off limits to others. Shusheng's gaze fell upon the trunk beneath the table where the couple dined. Yes, indeed. The old woman accidentally bumped into it yesterday and was scolded for it, she said, rubbing her waist, clearly affected by the incident. I find it odd that they don't seem like a genuine couple. Chinya remarked, observing the pair closely, noting the familiarity yet lack of intimacy between them. Indeed, I too find it peculiar. The station master concurred, stroking his beard. The elderly lady, suddenly struck by inspiration, declared, Young man, could it be that they are the ones who stole the silver? The couple, noticing their scrutiny, exhibited signs of nervousness, the wife retreating a step and feigning bravado. What are you staring at? The husband, his eyes narrowing, spoke soothingly. This silver has nothing to do with you if, he stepped forward. Attempting to shield the trunk, he insisted, This contains my purchased local specialties. It cannot be opened, or it will be ruined. Speak, will you come forward, or shall I? Chinya's unwavering gaze pinned them down. Didn't I say I would go first? Shu Sheng complained, then doused the brawling vendor and seller with a pot of tea, declaring, "Stop fighting. You may leave. The silver belongs to them." Both men paused in astonishment, releasing each other and sitting on the ground. Bewildered at how their fight had cleared their names, "It is you who stole the silver." Shu Sheng paced before the couple, halting in front of the man, raising his hand slowly, much to the man's incredulous expression. Before pointing at the woman, "It's impossible," he declared firmly. "Firstly, the station master is the least suspect. Had he been guilty, he would not have impeded your departure." The station master nodded in approval, stroking his beard with satisfaction. "As for you two, it seems your disagreement last night escalated into a brawl." He glanced at the seated pair, who, upon realization, nodded in confirmation. They had indeed quarreled. One had snored, the other had been unable to tolerate it, leading to a heated argument. "Thus, the remaining suspects are you two." Shu Sheng smiled brightly, his demeanor now elevated in Chinya's eyes. "Young man, you must be mistaken. My wife and I would never resort to such actions." The husband protested, his eyes flashing with anger. "You have remained composed throughout, barely glancing this way. Observe your attire. It's clear you lack financial hardship, hence you are not the thief. It is she who has taken it." Though she appeared calm, her anxious demeanor betrayed her, her foot tapping nervously, and her gaze would dart away whenever it fell upon the trunk. "Why, wife is shy," the husband interjected, struggling to maintain his composure. Shu Sheng regarded him with pity, shaking his head. "Are you truly a couple? The husband is dressed finely, yet the wife?" The husband forced a smile, attempting to rationalize. "I dress well for business. It's necessary to have decent attire while traveling." "Oh," Shu Sheng drawled, then turned to the wife. "Where are you heading?" Without hesitation, the woman replied, "Back to my family home." Shu Sheng observed the husband in silence, who, realizing the implication, grew increasingly agitated and snapped, "What business is it of yours? Who wishes to meddle in your affairs? Hand over the silver." Shu Sheng retorted coldly, "I've stated repeatedly, we stole nothing." The husband bellowed, his temper flaring, veins bulging on his forehead. Shu Sheng pointed at the woman. "I did not accuse you. It is her who is guilty, and the silver is likely concealed on her person." He gestured towards her waist. "I've noticed you consistently protect your waist area." The station master, observing from the sidelines, shook his head in disbelief. "One should not judge by appearances. I say, good sir, you ought to treat your wife with more generosity." "Madam, shall we involve the authorities?" he inquired of the elderly lady, who trembled with rage. "Do you possess a conscience? That is my family's life-saving money." The husband, agitated, turned to the woman, who, avoiding his gaze, caused his mind to race. In a fit of fury, he slapped her, disdain dripping from his words. "You read nothing but a liability." The woman fell to the ground, covering her bruised face, too terrified to speak. "Produce the silver," he hissed through clenched teeth, his eyes filled with menace. Terrified, she shakily retrieved 10 small silver ingots from her waist and sleeves, trembling as she presented them. Yes, it is my silver." Madame Jean lunged forward, embracing the silver ingot with overwhelming joy, tears streaming down her face. "Look, there are still my markings on it," she exclaimed, pointing at a small scratch on the bottom of one of the ingots, her smile radiating contentment. The man, seething with anger, gritted his teeth and produced a 2-tael silver ingot, placing it before the elderly lady with a forced smile. "Why, apologies for my lax discipline. I hope you can forgive this oversight. This is a token of apology. Do not take offense." He bowed repeatedly to the onlookers. Madame Jean, tempted to defiantly hurl the silver at his face and admonish the couple for their repulsiveness, reconsidered. Her spouse and grandson required treatment, which could demand a considerable sum. Better to have an extra tael than to be short. She tucked the silver away, leaving behind a remark: "In the future, do not bring such women out to disgrace yourselves." With a disdainful spit, she turned and walked away. The truth had emerged, leading to a collective sense of resolution and relief. Madame Jean grasped Shu Sheng's hand, exclaiming her regrets at not having a granddaughter, for she would have made an exquisite choice. Sensing the low atmosphere around her, Shu Sheng exclaimed, "Elderly lady, are you avenging or expressing gratitude?" The station master laughed heartily. "Ah, at last, peace reigns. let us drink. He seized a jar of liquor and began to drink heartily. The vendors ceased their bickering, glaring at each other, only to be kicked by the station master. Enough! Have you not fought enough? I invite you to drink. He squatted down, offering the jar. The two vendors were momentarily stunned, but the smaller one laughed first, taking a sip before passing it to the other, who followed suit. They exchanged a knowing smile, letting go of their grievances. Chinya retrieved a packet of jerky, lamenting her hunger as she leaned on the table. Weakly humming, nearby, the couple prepared to leave. The woman, eager to please her husband, stepped forward to help with the boxes but was met with a fierce glare. Get aside. Feeling helpless, she followed behind, her heart fluttering with anxiety. The man strode out with the boxes. Chinya yawned, chewing on the jerky, feeling drowsy, as the man walked past. Her ears perked up suddenly, her expression tense as she sat upright. Noticing her abrupt movement, the man eyed her warily. Chinya curiously glanced at the box. What do you have in there? Her tone was innocent, reminiscent of a naive girl intrigued by the world. The man slightly relaxed his guard, yet remained cautious. Just some local specialties. Local specialties? Chinya echoed, puzzled. Indeed. The man attempted to leave. Chinya stood, a cold smile gracing her lips. May I take a look? Young lady, I told you, the box cannot be opened. It would all be ruined. He turned his back. His expression menacing. A mere glance won't harm anyone, Chinya retorted pointedly. Stay at home, young lady, and do not wander about. The man scoffed, striding away. Chinya leaped onto the table, launching a kick at him. He stumbled, the force causing the box to slip from his grasp. Startled, he shouted furiously, You foul-haired girl, you thwart my endeavors. Instinctively, he lunged at her with claw-like fingers, resembling a predatory eagle swooping down. Chinya appeared as a tender lamb, about to be snatched away. Look, a hidden weapon. From behind, Shu Sheng, shaken and trembling, summoned an unexpected surge of courage, grabbing a chair and hurling it, then crouching down, covering her head. Do not strike the face. Chinya, amused, rolled her eyes. The man's humiliation deepened as he recognized the timid scholar's earlier mockery. He lunged forward, intending to seize his neck, to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the station master pulled the dazed Madame Jean into a corner, while the vendors huddled together, trembling, no longer harboring disdain for one another. You pathetic scholar, seeking death, the man snarled, clutching Shu Sheng's collar. I'll tear your mouth apart, and let us see how you prattle. His face was a mask of malice, his eyes burning with a desire to consume her. I tell you, evil deeds beget retribution. Shu Sheng stammered. I do not believe in such nonsense. He shook his head, glancing back in disbelief, only to see Chinya tossing aside a broken stool, dusting off her hands, and adopting a lecturing demeanor towards Shu Sheng. Remember, when using a stool to strike, aim for tea without lifting her head. She crushed half of the pills and stuffed them into the child's mouth. Shu Sheng watched her deftly pry open the child's lips and push the medication further in, cautioning, be careful not to choke. Chinya looked up, her expression inscrutable. I Ching approached, patting her shoulder, and admonished. If you don't want to be hit, I suggest you remain silent. Shu Sheng chuckled awkwardly. Hee hee. Come on, little brother, let us drink. I Ching seized him and began to drag him away. Shu Sheng struggled, exclaiming, Wait, I can't drink. I Ching resolutely ignored him, pulling him along forcefully. In the kitchen, Grandma Jean was directing the vendors and peddlers in a frenzy. Standing in the center, she wielded a large spoon, exclaiming, Salt, salt, that is salt. Are you giving it away for free with that amount? Oh no! The vendor trembled, inadvertently adding even more salt. Grandma Jean fretted. How can we eat this? She urged the peddler. Hurry, add more water. The peddler, dazed, complied, pouring in water. Enough, enough. Are you a pig? How can we eat with so much water? Grandma Jean was exasperated. Finally, she glanced at a bowl of boiled radishes and a basin of strangely colored vegetable soup, paused for a moment, and waved for them to take it away. It shouldn't to be lethal. Right? She muttered to herself, bending down to scoop some rice, wash it, and prepare porridge in the hall. I Cheng gazed at the two dishes in silence for a moment, then declared, No need, you all eat. Shu Sheng quietly retrieved the steamed bun he had intended to discard, and upon seeing him reach for it, I Cheng looked at him. Eventually, He divided it in half and offered him a portion. Thus, the two of them drank while gnawing on the hard bun. The oil lamp flickered, and as Qianyi regained her senses, she realized it had grown dark outside. "Miss, have a bowl of porridge." Grandma Jean entered with a bowl of porridge, her face beaming upon seeing Qianyi. "No need, Granny. You enjoy it." Qianyi politely declined. Grandma Jean waved her hand. "At my age, I can't withstand hunger. I've already eaten. I'll manage downstairs. Leave this bowl for the child when he wakes up." In truth, she thought the porridge was too meager to even fill her gaps. "All right, such a good girl, off you go. I will keep watch here." Grandma Jean gestured for her to hurry along, assuring her that she was fine. As Qianyi stepped out, she stretched, feeling both exhausted and hungry. Descending the stairs, she spotted two corpses lying in the corner, which startled her into rushing down. Xu Shang, lost in despair, sat on the ground clutching a wine jar. Laughing foolishly while Li Cheng, disregarding all decorum, tugged at his sleeve, wailing inconsolably about his daughter, Lin Yang, and so forth. "Hey, wake up!" Qianyi kicked at him. "What is going on with you two?" "Hee hee." Xu Shang stared blankly. Continuing to laugh foolishly. "No, I don't know." Qianyi's eyes turned cold, ready to scold him. Xu Shang chuckled again, gesturing. "I know now. Hick. The smell of wine is overwhelming." Qianyi stepped back in disdain. "It must be because you got drunk from eating too many vegetables," he asserted, nodding affirmatively while cradling the wine jar. The once studious scholar had transformed into a hopeless drunkard. Qianyi cursed silently. Approaching the wall, she noticed the peddler and vendor lying there, wide-eyed and dazed. "Hey, are you two all right?" She crossed her arms, showing no inclination to assist. "We're fine, just a bit stuffed," the vendor hiccuped. "What did you eat to feel that way?" "Look at that bulging stomach," the peddler lamented. "The food was too salty, and we drank too much water. You could have eaten less, but we be hungry," both exclaimed in unison, casting her a look of mild disdain. Qianyi was speechless and retreated in defeat. In the kitchen, Qianyi cradled a bowl of noodles, her extraordinary strength and appetite evident since childhood. The broth was bland, utterly unappetizing. "Carnivores," she grumbled. "Ha ha." A drunken Xu Shang leaned against the kitchen door. Grinning foolishly, "I counted. You've eaten 3 bowls." Qianyi, expressionless, stared at him, while Xu Shang, still grinning, stumbled over, exclaiming, "Qianyi, eating too much will burst." He placed his hands on his stomach and mimicked an explosion, gazing at her expectantly. "No need to see you off." Qianyi spun him around and pushed him forward. "Up, no, no." He whined like a child, pouting. "Why do you always look down on me?" Qianyi paused, stood up, and with a stern face, carried her bowl away. Suddenly, Xu Shang lunged at her. Crash! The bowl shattered, the noodles ruined. "Ouch!" he cried out in pain, sprawled across Qianyi. The next day, Xu Shang awoke in bed, his clothes in disarray. "Ouch!" He touched his swollen lip, wondering what he had done last night. "What did I do last night?" he groaned, clutching his head in agony, questioning why his back ached. He staggered downstairs, only to see Qianyi approaching, noticing her in a different outfit. Yesterday she had worn a light blue outer garment, and today it was a plain pale green. Suddenly, an idea flickered in his mind. Qianyi walked past him without a glance. Xu Shang quietly followed, observing her sharpening a knife in the kitchen. The sound of the blade scraping against the stone sent chills down his spine. Alarmingly, she sharpened one blade and proceeded to another. "This is bad. This is bad." Xu Shang felt his demise was imminent. "What are you hiding here for?" Suddenly, a shadow loomed over him as he crouched. He looked up, seeing Qianyi silhouetted against the light, her expression obscured, but the knife she held gleamed ominously, emanating a chilling aura. The two exchanged silent glances before Xu Shang bolted upright and fled in panic, shouting, "Heroine, let us talk this over." His voice was piercing. Qianyi's face remained expressionless as she watched him leap around, then scamper up a tree, crying and wailing, "Heroine, how about we compromise?" He sobbed while mourning the loss of his innocence, feeling it was unjust that he had endured a beating without any sensation. "What madness are you up to so early in the morning?" Qianyi cast a sidelong glance at him. "Have you fallen stupid?" "Huh?" Xu Shang blinked, cautiously asking, "I didn't do anything last night." "Did I?" "You did," Qianyi replied bluntly. Xu Shang's legs trembled, nearly tumbling from the tree, his voice breaking. Heroine, I think we should discuss this further. There's no need for a knife. If you don't want to marry, then I shall marry. He wiped away his bitter tears. Qianyi found his plight amusing. You're quite the early riser, aren't you? Hurry up and get down. We'll be leaving soon. Then tell me first. Why are you sharpening the knife? Xu Sheng insisted, his eyes glistening with tears. Qianyi, exhausted, replied weakly. Yi Cheng said the kitchen knife was too dull, so he asked me to help sharpen it. Then why do I feel all sore? And my lip is swollen? You got drunk last night and insisted on throwing up on me. She shot him a meaningful glance. Realization dawned on Xu Sheng. He had indeed been beaten. Is that all? He asked with a hint of disappointment. That is all? Qianyi studied him, her brow furrowed. Hurry down and get ready. We'll be leaving in a short while. With that, she turned and walked away. Leaving Xu Sheng perched in the tree, pondering why his lip was swollen. In the kitchen, Qianyi pressed her hand to her chest, suddenly sighed deeply, and began to pack away the steamed buns. Questioning why she was overthinking. If it's not yours, it's not yours. Outside the station, Yi Cheng had intentionally brought out the old horse. Seeing this, Qianyi inquired, Are you going along? Yi Cheng paused while harnessing the cart, falling silent for a moment before responding in a subdued yet profoundly strained tone. It's been 5 years. My daughter has been missing for 5 years. Every day during these 5 years, I have prayed, hoping that one day someone would bring her back to me. Those without children cannot comprehend this pain. He thumped his chest heavily, the sound echoing. Xu Sheng, munching on a bun, approached and, upon hearing this, scrutinized him closely before speaking up. Uncle, how old are you? Uncle. He had the audacity to call him uncle. Yi Cheng's veins bulged, wishing to slap him dead. I'm 28. He ground out through clenched teeth. It seemed that regardless of gender, age was always a sensitive topic. Xu Sheng, undeterred, added, You look like you're 48. He even stepped closer to tug at Yi Cheng's beard, then proudly stroked his own smooth chin. Yi Cheng was furious, discarding his shoe and brandishing it menacingly. Do you believe I'll smack you? Xu Sheng lazily lifted his eyelids to glance, then shuffled a couple of steps to stand behind Qianyi. Although she didn't look at them, Qianyi subtly shifted half a step to the side. Seeing this, Yi Cheng could only glare in frustration, ultimately dropping his shoe. Chapter 40. The skinny little vendor and the fair-faced peddler arrived with a donkey cart. And the vendor jumped down, cupping his hands in gratitude. Thank you for last night's dinner. Miss? Qianyi shook her head, indicating it was nothing. Yi Cheng took a sip of wine, raising his eyebrows casually. Why are you two traveling together? Didn't you part ways in a quarrel yesterday? Ha ha. Well, the journey is long. It's good to have company. The vendor's face stiffened awkwardly, while the peddler, with a mix of disdain and slight pride, remarked, He's worried about his goods being stolen, so he asked me to accompany him. Anyway, he's just a peddler wandering the world. Madame Jin strolled over leisurely, her voice laden with gravity as she remarked, Meeting is but a matter of fate. Do not squander the intentions of the heavens. Upon her arrival, the vendor felt a tinge of embarrassment and, with an apologetic tone, said, My apologies, dear lady. It is not as if you have stolen my silver. So why the need for such apologies? She, however, took it all in stride. The vendor chuckled heartily, producing a fine silk handkerchief embroidered with delicate flowers and grasses, a keepsake for the elderly lady, wishing her companion and grandson a swift recovery. He presented it with a flourish. That is music to my ears. Madame Jin's wrinkles softened with a smile, and she handed over a package she had prepared earlier, saying, Here, take this to eat. I am truly grateful. Your thoughtfulness is commendable. The vendor beamed with delight, his face aglow, sweetly declaring, Today, your spirit is truly admirable. You appear at least a decade younger. He tucked a silk flower behind her ear, exclaiming, Truly enchanting. 2 rosy spots appeared on Madame Jin's cheeks, and she laughed heartily, feigning anger as she chided, At my age, how can one still be enchanting? Save that charm for your wife. Yet, despite her words, she could not bring herself to remove the flower from her ear. Not a trace. The vendor furrowed his brow, recalling something, his tone becoming as bland as water. Everyone, I apologize for the jest yesterday. Let us part ways here, wishing you all success and smooth sailing. The lean vendor nodded to the crowd before driving away, while another, laden with a bundle of steamed buns, leaned out the window, vigorously waving goodbye. Even at a distance, they could hear him grumbling about the cramped space in the cart, suggesting they should lighten the load. From afar, the vendor seemed to retort, "I would rather throw you out than the goods." Incensed, the vendor raised his hand as if to strike him. "Let us depart. I presume his family is anxious." The station master gazed gently at the child in Chinya's arms, a wry smile on his lips. "Shall we divide our paths?" Shushing inquired, glancing at the station master's carriage. "Who will watch over those two in the cellar?" The station master and Madame Jin's gaze simultaneously turned to Chinya. "Heroine, we must rely on you." After a moment's contemplation, Chinya placed the child in the carriage, shielding him with a blanket. "Let us not separate. The station master and the scholar will drive, while the lady keeps an eye on the child, and I will watch those two." Agreed. The station master tucked the wine pouch behind his waist, unbridled the horse, and harnessed it to Chinya's carriage, noting that the carriage was not small. "Why is he still unconscious?" The station master circled the man bound on the ground twice, and Shushing muttered, "It must be because he was unruly and got knocked out again by Chinya." Turning to him, the station master patted his shoulder in commendation. "Brother, your courage is commendable, but your reasoning seems a bit off." Shusheng shot him a disdainful glance, waving away his hand in contempt. "What do you know?" "Oh, how could I not understand?" The station master rolled up his sleeves, speaking with fervor, "Though my knowledge of women is limited, it surpasses yours. You novel lad," he mocked, his shining white teeth glinting. "I in youth, one admires grace, the delicate beauty with an air of elegance. While one may not possess the visage of a flower or the skin of jade, one should at least have eyebrows like a crescent moon and a demeanor reminiscent of serene mountains and flowing waters, with a figure as graceful as willow, moving as gently as the breeze caresses the flowers." His eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, and his mouth seemed to water at the thought. Yet Shushing remained unfazed, waiting for him to pause before coolly remarking, "No wonder you live such a life. Have you lost your daughter? Or has your wife run away?" His concern was evident. A moment of silence ensued. The station master frozen as if struck by a spell, mouth agape, eyes wide, as if he had been dealt a stunning blow. "You seem to have read a few books, tales and such. Do not take them literally." Shushing did not look at him, his gaze fixed on Chinya, observing her busy figure with a gentle smile. Without the skill to transform life into a tapestry of music, chess, calligraphy, poetry, wine, and flowers, one should simply live a humble existence of rice, oil, and vinegar. A master once imparted to me a piece of wisdom. One fears living in limbo, neither reaching the heavens nor touching the earth, all the while failing to see oneself clearly. Suddenly, Shushing noticed Chinya bending down, reaching towards the man, and in shock, he leapt up, shouting, "Stop! What are you doing?" He positioned himself in front of the man, puffing out his chest. "Touching him is foul." Chinya shot him an annoyed glance. "I merely wondered if he possessed anything of interest, such as silver." Shushing's eyes brightened. "Such as silver?" They exchanged a knowing smile. "Then you need not act. Allow me to handle this rough work." As he spoke, he crouched down and began to search the man meticulously from top to bottom. The man grunted and stirred, prompting Shushing to sit on his stomach, continuing his search, causing the woman nearby to shift aside in alarm. Madame Jin, witnessing this scene, was still fuming, muttering, "That wretched woman, with hands and feet. Why not find some honest work? Stealing from my dear lady's life savings. Does she not fear her own heart turning to stone?" As she glared fiercely, the woman recoiled, her mouth agape in terror. "What are you wailing about? Can you not speak?" Madame Jin's ire flared as she recalled the woman had yet to utter a word. Sensing something ominous, Chinya approached, squatted down, and grasped the woman's chin, commanding, "Open your mouth." The woman's face was a picture of fear as she hesitantly complied, revealing only half a tongue within. Madame Jin trembled all over, exclaiming, This? Chinya cast a cold glance at the groaning man on the ground. "Did he do this?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, suddenly bowing repeatedly to Chinya, her fervent gestures causing her forehead to bleed from the rocky ground. Madame Jin's lips moved, unsure of what to say. Chinya pulled her up, but the woman shook her head. Kneeling on the ground, pleading with her eyes, Chinya, meeting her gaze, suddenly asked, "Do you seek something from me?" The woman wept bitterly. "For your child." She nodded vigorously, her face streaked with tears. Qinya, I found it, Shu Xing suddenly exclaimed, brandishing a handful of glistening silver coins and a stack of small notes. His face alight with excitement. Upon seeing their troubled expressions, he paused, uncertain. What has happened? In Panja village, Dingyan guided the tightly wrapped woman outside, while Pan Dachuan, holding the child, followed helplessly behind. Dingyan halted, speaking stiffly, do not follow us. Return to Nujia village at once. Where are you headed? Shall I call your brother-in-law to see you off? Pan Dachuan hesitated. Can you not be so clingy? Dingyan finally exploded, her voice cracking as she shouted. Can you not be a bit more resolute? Sister, have you caused trouble? Pan Dachuan, suddenly lost, cried. Do not cry, little sister. I am not crying, Dingyan retorted. It always ends up like this. A little resistance and soon enough, you will retract. You can never stand firm. Dingyan gritted her teeth in frustration. Why did you agree? Why? Pan Dachuan was taken aback by her anger, weakly responding. But the clan elder is almost on his knees. The clan elder pleaded so earnestly. He was on the verge of kneeling before her. She could not just ignore it. He knelt. What does it have to do with you? You are no longer a part of Panja village. Do you not understand? What right do you have to agree to let my second sister go? Dingyan's rage was palpable. How could you stab me in the back like this? But I am the eldest sister. Pan Dachuan exclaimed, his eyes wide. Confusion etched on his face as he failed to comprehend why she could not manage them. You always do this, kneeling in the dirt for others while dragging us down with you. Clearly unable to rise, you still insist on thinking you are doing what is best for her. I do not need your misguided affection. Dingyan finally broke down, shouting, why do you always consider this and that? Yet never think of how I feel. She covered her mouth to suppress her cries, yet tears streamed down her face. You never consider how I manage to provide for you. You never ask if I am well or if I have enough to eat. You only know that if someone cries in front of you, you soften your heart. She choked out, patting her chest. You should be the one feeling sorry for me. Such fine rice, you can give away as you please. Do you realize that was our ration for half a month? I saved up fabric for you, tirelessly scrounging for silver. What about you? Anyone can borrow. Dingyan gazed sorrowfully at her, saying forlornly, why do you not care for me? She longed to be able to charm and please Master Mingjing, to shine as brightly and openly as Qinya. But she felt guilty. She was not ungrateful, but she dared not get too close for fear of their disappointment. Little sister, Pan Dongdong reached out a frail hand, hesitating to pat her shoulder, but ultimately withdrew. Oh, not blame her. The eldest sister has her own struggles. She cannot struggle and force us into submission. Dingyan wiped her face, her expression shifting from rage to cold determination. You may leave. Return, little sister. No, that will not do. I will plead with the village chief and the clan elder. I will kneel if necessary. Sister, people are not the same, Pan Dongdong replied sadly. Even if you kneel before them, who will spare you a glance? Dingyan fell silent once more, standing atop a rise as she gazed into the distance at the village, a place she had longed to escape in her youth, yet now felt both reluctant and resentful to leave. Finally, she was departing, but not a shred of joy filled her heart. Watching the figures of her friends, supporting each other as they walked away, Pan Dachuan remained transfixed for a considerable time, until the sudden wail of a child jolted her back to reality. Pan Dachuan was uncertain of what was right or wrong. Rather, she was lost in the complexity of discerning such truths. Forced to heed the counsel of those around her, she pondered the thought that her younger sister would not return, nor would her second sister, leaving her alone in this place. A sense of despair began to creep in. Chapter 41. A cart, drawn by both donkey and horse, ambled toward Tanxiang County. The vehicle swayed gently, as the aging horse maintained a pace nearly equal to that of the robust donkey, resulting in a surprisingly swift journey. The courier and Shu Xing sat outside, guiding the cart, while within the compartment lay a man bound tightly, tossed carelessly like a sack. Shu Xing had insisted on this arrangement, claiming that any noise would alert Qinya. The child who had been rescued was no longer feverish, yet appeared weak. When he heard that Qinya intended to take him home, he merely opened his eyes with great effort, and upon recognizing she was not his captor, he offered a faint smile of relief before drifting back into a deep slumber. Inside the cart, The ever-recent grievance of old Lady Jin lingered as she glared at the woman beside her. Her anger palpable. "Why did you steal my silver?" she demanded vehemently. The woman gestured wildly, her voice rising in a cacophony of sounds. Chinya glanced between her and the child they had just saved. Hesitating before asking, "Did you do it to save your child?" The woman nodded fervently, her gestures becoming more frantic. After a prolonged moment of confusion, Chinya finally grasped the message. The woman was indicating that she had been coerced by the man they had bound, resulting in her bearing a child. The woman's gestures became increasingly desperate, indicating that her child was ill, and that the man had shown no concern for the child's well-being, leading her to resort to thievery. The woman's despair was palpable, and silence enveloped the group as they were at a loss for words to offer comfort. Old Lady Jin wiped away her tears, sighing, "What a pitiful situation." Chinya raised an eyebrow in confusion, asking, "Haven't you ever attempted to escape?" Old Lady Jin sighed deeply. "Oh, foolish child. Where could she possibly flee? That man could easily declare her an unfaithful wife. Who would believe her? Others would merely accuse her of being discontented with her domestic life. Moreover, once sullied, where could she go?" The elder's furrowed brow deepened, and she continued. Once she bore a child, her options would dwindle even further. "The child is, after all, a woman's very essence. Dear girl," she said earnestly to Chinya, "regardless of the state of the world, women must learn to protect themselves." Her words seemed to resonate not only with Chinya but also with all women everywhere. In Tanxiang County, at the city gates, Shusheng stared in astonishment at a throng of officials and a line of notices posted outside the walls. "What is the meaning of this? A citywide manhunt?" he inquired incredulously. The courier leaned in for a closer look, then returned to lift the card's curtain, glancing at the sleeping child within. "It must be for this child," he exclaimed. "Why is he still asleep? Is he truly all right?" he asked, scrutinizing the child with concern, then turned to Chinya with a serious expression. Chinya remained relaxed, not opening her eyes. "I administered a mild sedative," she replied nonchalantly. "Is it safe for such a small child?" He pressed, worry etching his features. "He should be fine, I think," Chinya replied, uncertain if the medication meant for adults would adversely affect a child. The courier frowned. "Can you not be more certain?" Chinya retorted. "I am not a physician. How could I possibly know if there would be any issues? Yet you would dare to administer medication to such a young child without certainty." The courier shouted in frustration. Shusheng, tired of the escalating argument, stepped forward and shoved the courier aside, coldly remarking, "Would you rather watch him suffer?" After a moment of silence, the courier calmed himself, apologizing. "I reacted too harshly. Seeing him reminds me of my daughter." He managed a bittersweet smile. I am so sorry, Miss Ming." He rubbed his face, tension evident in his jaw. "The medicine is gentle, and I've halved the dosage," Chinya stated matter-of-factly. "What is it you wish to convey?" "Does this child possess some special significance?" Shusheng asked, glancing at the notices on the gate. The courier responded, "Word has it that the county magistrate's son has gone missing." "Oh, but it is not as though we were the ones who took him." "What is there to be anxious about?" Chinya questioned, puzzled by the courier's seriousness. "Perhaps he fears we might be implicated?" Shusheng mused, sensing the courier's overreaching concern. The courier chuckled lightly, then burst into laughter. Startling old Lady Jin, who was dozing nearby, it took some time for him to regain his composure, and when he did, he remarked, "Ever since my daughter went missing, I have ceased to trust anyone." "Do you know why?" he asked himself. "Because my daughter was taken by someone I once considered a close friend. That day, he lured her away with a piece of candy." The courier's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Chinya hesitated. "Is it because your eyes are so striking, beautiful?" Shusheng interjected. "What is appealing about dead fish eyes?" "Enough." The courier's temper flared, veins popping at his temples. With a privileged upbringing and minimal parental restrictions, the courier had developed a penchant for lavish spending and was known for his generosity, often inviting friends over for drinking. In hindsight, he mused that if he hadn't frequently entertained this friend, perhaps his daughter would not have felt secure enough to leave with him. "For the sake of 50 taels, he could sell my daughter," the courier bellowed, anguish ripping through his voice. "But how could you be certain it was he who took your daughter?" Chinya questioned, skeptical of how one could be deceived for so long. "I sought him out and overheard him boasting about it to his gambling companions. My rage was indescribable. I wanted nothing more than to exact vengeance. Yet I could not. I must find my daughter. Each passing day brings her more suffering. Friends cannot be trusted, so what of strangers? In the magistrate's residence, the disheveled magistrate consoled his tearful wife. Atao, do not fear. Everything will be all right. It has been 2 days, the beautiful woman cried in despair. You promised me you would find her, and now, where is she? Xue Taodao rushed to the table, seizing a teacup and hurling it at him. Where is my child? Where is my child? Her voice was sharp with desperation. The magistrate embraced his wife, holding her tightly as his lips trembled. I swear. I will find our child. I will find her. Across the world, through every hardship, he would not relent, my child. Xue Taotao cried out, her strength seemingly spent, collapsing into her husband's arms, tears streaming down her face. It is my fault. It is my fault, she lamented. The magistrate, holding her tightly, felt the weight of her sorrow as her tears echoed the anguish of their missing child. Sir, we have news. The young master has been found. The steward called out, his face alight with joy. What? The magistrate quickly wiped his face and turned, asking eagerly, Where? Where is Chang'er? For a moment, Xue Taotao pushed past him, rushing out. The magistrate swiftly intercepted her. Atao, let us go together. Together. The couple dashed to the entrance of the county office, where they encountered a disheveled scholar, the weary courier, an elderly lady, and a round girl. Chang'er, where is Chang'er? Xue Taotao's eyes scanned the group, landing on the cart behind them. In that moment of hope, Qinya emerged, cradling a child in her arms. With a cry of recognition, Xue Taotao rushed forward, her heart breaking as she called out. Chang'er! Chang'er! The child, bleary-eyed and confused, gazed up at her, whispering, Mother, oh, my child. Chang'er, you truly have returned. Lady Xue wept, embracing her child. The child, bewildered, looked from her to the father, his eyes brimming with tears, before bursting into a wail. The magistrate stepped forward, enveloping his wife and child in his arms, his voice trembling as he expressed gratitude. Thank you all for returning my child. Regardless of your motives, at this moment, I am profoundly grateful. He could scarcely fathom the devastation that would have ensued had they not recovered their child. The courier stood frozen, observing the family's reunion, while Xu Xing, closest to him, offered a reassuring pat on the shoulder. One day, your daughter will return. The courier managed a bitter smile and shook his head, turning away to take a swig from his flask. Hope had almost slipped from his grasp. He wondered how his wife and grandson were faring. Madame Jean let out a sigh, and Qinya gently grasped her hand, whispering, Everything will be all right. In the study, the county magistrate of Ning invited them to sit down. My surname is Ning. My given name is Jia. Courtesy name Hong Yong. I am the magistrate of Tansheng County. The courier bowed his hands, introducing himself. Jian Zhe. I am the courier here. He mocked. Hee. It was purchased with money. The atmosphere grew tense. Hee. The county magistrate of Ning wore a stiff expression. Are you hoping to visit the prison? Xu Sheng turned to glance at him, silently exhaling. I am Xu Sheng, courtesy name Jiming. I am but a scholar I earned through my own efforts. Magistrate Ning nodded, saying nothing more. Only inquiring, how did you rescue my son? Jinzei recounted how the old lady had lost silver and subsequently disappeared. Xu Sheng continued, detailing how they encountered and saved the old lady, culminating in Qinya intercepting the fraudulent couple. Oh, what a twist of fate! The county magistrate expressed his relief. If either of you requires my assistance, do not hesitate to ask. His tone was half an inquiry, half sincere. Officials most dread being beholden to others. This? Xu Xing decisively shook his head. Jianzhe suddenly became agitated, exclaiming loudly, My lord, I only beseech you to help me find my daughter. My lord, I desire nothing else, only to reunite with my daughter. He knelt before the magistrate, pleading, my lord, I implore you, please help me. He prostrated heavily, tears streaming from the corners of his eyes, creating a small puddle on the ground. My daughter has been missing for 5 years, 5 whole years. Every time I close my eyes, I see her crying. Jinzei pounded the ground in frustration, lamenting his own impotence. Xu Sheng hurriedly helped him to his feet. Uncle, do not be like this, alas. The county magistrate sighed heavily, approaching and bending down to assist him, exclaiming, All fathers in the world share the same heart. Chapter 42. I am truly grateful to you all. Xue Taotao's gaze was sincere. Her words heartfelt. You have saved my child. And for that, you are my benefactors. Please, do not hesitate to ask for anything. Madame Jean waved her hand dismissively. Madam, it was merely happenstance, and it was thanks to this young lady's keen ears that we learned the truth. Young lady, how can I express my gratitude to you? Xue Taotao scrutinized her, noting her baby-faced cheeks and curvaceous figure, neatly attired, exuding an air of competence not typically associated with women. Her gaze softened a fraction as she grasped Chenya's hand. What a wonderful girl, thank you. She looked toward her son, who was drinking porridge nearby, her demeanor tranquil and relaxed. It was nothing, Chenya replied, shaking her head while hesitating to meet her gaze. Xue Taotao maintained her smile, straightening up and withdrawing her hand, saying, if the young lady has something to say, please do not hesitate. Madame Jean hurriedly tugged at Chenya's sleeve, concerned. This girl is so straightforward. After all, she is the magistrate's wife. Are you truly bold enough to bring it up? Chenya gently pressed her hand down, her eyes fixed intently on Xue Taotao, who furrowed her brow slightly and stated, Madam, that woman was also coerced by that man using the child as leverage. Could you perhaps speak a kind word to the magistrate to show some leniency toward her? Madame Jean breathed a sigh of relief, quickly adding, indeed, that woman is also a victim. Xue Taotao, upon hearing this, did not elaborate further, merely stating that she would remember it. After leaving the magistrate's office, Madame Jean remarked to Chenya, that is the magistrate's wife. Next time, you mustn't be so reckless. Chenya, confused, replied, but she asked me to bring it up. She was merely being polite, Madame Jean fretted. What if you say something wrong? You might find yourself in jail. Then she is even more foolish than I, Chenya muttered. What? The lecturing Madame Jean was taken aback. Madam, are you not concerned about your husband and grandson? Oh dear, oh dear. Madame Jean's expression changed, and she dashed away. I had thought she was more concerned about whether the magistrate's wife would have her imprisoned. She pouted, feeling somewhat distressed at oh dear. Is it that the elderly are all so loquacious? At noon, the county magistrate hosted a banquet for several guests. Come, please do not stand on ceremony, the county magistrate beamed. I presume this young lady is the valiant heroine of intellect and courage, he jested. Chenya stared blankly, blinking at Shusheng, who understood immediately and interjected, My lord, please do not flatter her. It was merely a fortunate coincidence. The county magistrate of Ning glanced at the two of them, waved his hand but remained silent, smiling. Jianzhe, feeling dejected, drank deeply from his cup. My lord, I am curious. Why did they abduct your son? Generally, kidnappers do not brazenly target the magistrate's child. Humph. A group of audacious scoundrels, deserving of no pity. The county magistrate replied coldly. This story goes back 5 years. When I first assumed office, I encountered a gang of traffickers on my way. In my youthful exuberance, I did not perceive anything amiss with that group, until I overheard a passerby's casual remark that sparked my vigilance. It was only later that I learned they took advantage of the transition period between the old magistrate and the newly appointed one to abduct women and children en masse. Generally, the old magistrate wishes to leave quietly, avoiding trouble, while the new magistrate desires a smooth transition, also wishing to avoid conflicts. But I refuse to be intimidated. The county magistrate slammed his hand on the table, declaring, I became an official for the welfare of the people. How could I cower in fear? I instructed the clerk to bring the constables and summoned many bodyguards to capture them all. He recounted casually, but one could imagine that such a large-scale trafficking organization must have some powerful backing. The hardships endured need not be elaborated. This man must be one of those who escaped. But now he has set his sights on my young son. He smiled bitterly, feeling guilt for not protecting his delicate wife and child, pained for his son's suffering, and filled with hatred for the kidnapper. My lord, I shall raise a glass in your honor, Jianzhe exclaimed, rising abruptly and downing his drink in one gulp, only to choke and tear up. Just then, the magistrate's wife, Xue Taotao, arrived with her young son. Upon seeing his wife and child, the county magistrate's expression softened, and he beckoned, Come, Chenger, thank our rescuers. Thank you for saving me. The small child earnestly performed a deep bow. His cherubic face still bore the pallor of recent illness. And though his little legs wobbled, He stood as straight as he could. A flicker of tenderness crossed the county magistrate's eyes. Yet he chided, "What a poor display!" Though his tone was scolding, it lacked any real anger. Instead revealing concern. "All right, you little rascal. We shall discuss being a strict father later. Chang'er has just recovered," Shui Taotao teased. The county magistrate's stern demeanor faltered, and he beckoned, pulling his son onto his lap. The soft, tender little body nestled against him, and he felt a swell of emotion, his eyes reddening as he embraced him, finally experiencing the profound bond of blood. Jianzhe suddenly stood up. "My lord, I apologize. But I must take my leave for a moment." Shushing and Xinya exchanged bewildered glances, but upon observing the magistrate's family, they understood. He must have been moved by the scene. He hurriedly turned and strode away, his pace quickening, and Xinya could even hear the wind rustling past his garments. During the banquet, the county magistrate discussed the imperial examinations with Shusheng, while Shui Taotao cared for her young son, occasionally exchanging a few words with Xinya, causing her to eat cautiously for fear of startling her. "Esteemed guest, you must not do this. Please loosen your grip. She is just a little girl, and what offense has she committed that you should be so harsh?" A voice tinged with tears rang out sharply. Just then, a commotion arose, and "My lord, my lord!" The steward rushed over, his forehead glistening with sweat. "What has happened?" The county magistrate inquired, displeased. The steward awkwardly replied, "My lord, this, you should go and see for yourself." "Steward, what matter cannot you handle?" Shui Taotao was curious. This steward had been brought from home by the magistrate. What could possibly be beyond his capabilities? Shusheng and Xinya exchanged glances, suddenly sensing an ominous premonition. Sure enough, Jianzhe rushed in, tightly clutching a trembling, sobbing maid dressed in green. My lord, I?" His eyes sparkled with excitement, his beard trembling. The crowd worried that his fervor might inadvertently harm the little maid in his embrace. "Jianzhe, sit down and calm yourself. It is not too late." The county magistrate indicated a nearby chair with an impassive expression. "Uncle, please set the little girl down. Do not frighten her," Shusheng urged, observing that the maid was nearly gasping for air from her sobs. "No, no." Jianzhe glared at him warily, holding her even tighter. "Wah?" The maid's cries grew louder. "Uncle, please put her down first." Xinya finally set her chopsticks down, intending to intervene, but seeing the growing crowd around them, Jianzhe appeared increasingly agitated, stumbling backward as he shouted, "Stay back, all of you." "Preposterous." The county magistrate snapped. "Jianzhe, what do you intend to do?" Shusheng stepped forward to restrain him, but Jianzhe shook him off, causing Shusheng to stumble against the table. Xinya swiftly sidestepped, reaching out to catch him, then kicked Jianzhe's calf. Jianzhe's leg buckled, his balance faltering, and as he staggered, Xinya kicked him again, simultaneously seizing a plate with her right hand and pulling the maid closer with her left. Jianzhe attempted to evade, but Xinya's swift kick sent him stumbling back, while the plate crashed onto his head. The county magistrate and his wife stared in astonishment, while Ning Cheng'er gasped in delight, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Shusheng rubbed the spot where he had been struck and remarked, "Uncle, are you calm now? It is unacceptable. Chiba, please give the uncle another call." Chiba gently set down the little maid in her arms and began to search the table with her gaze. Jinza hurriedly exclaimed, "Enough, enough!" He staggered to his feet, clutching his head. "You are truly ruthless." He shot a glare at Shusheng. "Who told you to be so muddled-headed?" Shusheng snorted coldly. The county magistrate let out a disdainful snort and scolded. "Well done. Otherwise, how long would you continue to act foolishly? What on earth were you thinking, holding a little maid hostage like that?" "No, my lord, she—" Jinza began to explain. "Silence." The magistrate waved his hand dismissively. "Speak." He pointed at the anxious and kneeling old woman at the door, recalling that she had rushed in behind Jinza moments ago. "Yes, my lord. Today, my lord is hosting esteemed guests, and I, the old servant, am responsible for cleaning. What is the matter with you? How could you break a bowl again? This is the 5th time this month. If you keep this up, I fear you won't have a meal for the rest of the month." The old woman, fuming, pointed a finger at her and berated. "Look at this little maid. She seems rather clever, yet she can't seem to manage her tasks properly. It's always something." The little maid lowered her head, timidly refraining from speaking. "I'm sorry, Mom." I will pay more attention next time. The little maid looked up at her with pitiful eyes. You always say that, if this continues, which household would dare to take you in? The old woman sighed, speaking with resignation. All right, clean up the floor. Today, my lord and his lady are hosting esteemed guests, so be careful not to bump into anything. I knew the old woman was the best. The little maid flashed a big smile. Hurry up. The old woman glared sternly. The little maid stuck out her tongue and skipped away. Just as she was about to leave, a large hand grabbed her, and she turned around in surprise to see a face covered in a thick beard. With only 2 excited eyes visible, esteemed guest, do you need something? The little maid trembled in fear. The old woman gasped, silently cursing her luck. Could this guest have some peculiar proclivity? She rushed over to pry his hand off. This guest. This is the back courtyard. Male guests must stop here. My lord is entertaining you in the front courtyard. However, this guest was deaf to her words and continued to drag the little maid away. The old woman glared at Jinza with silent reproach. And you? The county magistrate raised his chin, signaling him to speak. Chapter 43. Jinza wandered through the corridor, turning this way and that until he became utterly disoriented and decided to sit on the stone steps in a daze. At that moment, he heard a soft, melodious voice calling, "The old woman is the best." He shivered all over as if struck by lightning. That voice, the way it elongated the syllables, reminded him of his daughter who used to speak like that. Despite his attempts to correct her, Jinza's eyes lit up as he focused on the little maid hiding behind the old woman. He took a few steps forward, crouched down, tears welling in his eyes, and gently called, "Rue, you are my daughter, Jean Ruer." Everyone was taken aback. The county magistrate furrowed his brow and calmly asked, "Is it based solely on this accent? Could it simply be a coincidence?" Shusheng also felt that was insufficient evidence. "No, my daughter has a black mole on her left wrist, right here." He pointed to a spot on the left side. The gaze of everyone shifted to the little maid, as Chiba stepped closer and nodded at them. Jinza exclaimed with excitement, "I told you she is my daughter, my daughter." His shout was so loud that those with sensitive hearing winced, and Chiba rolled her eyes. "Have you lost your mind? Do you need me to treat you?" Jinza fell silent at once. "Wait." Shusheng suddenly felt confused. "When did you lose your daughter? Be specific." Jinza was taken aback and quickly replied, "About 5 years, give or take 3 months." "Madam, when did this little maid arrive at the residence?" Turning, Shusheng asked Xue Taotao. Xue Taotao pondered for a moment, then suddenly smiled, her eyes filled with affection. "My lord, do you remember the human trafficking case we dealt with when we first took office 5 years ago?" She gazed at the county magistrate, seemingly intent on making things difficult for him. The magistrate, feeling a spark of recognition, took her hand and spoke with pride. "Of course I remember. It was my first time being so valiant. Looking back, I broke out in a cold sweat. That little maid was one of the children who had been abducted back then." Xue Taodao pointed at the little maid in green. She was the youngest. Unable to describe her home, and with nowhere to go, she has been raised in the residence ever since. "How fortuitous," the county magistrate mused. "So it is true." Shusheng muttered quietly. Chiba discreetly wiped her mouth and remarked, "If we don't find his daughter soon, he might go mad." Shusheng glanced behind her and saw that they had consumed everything edible. She wondered if any had been saved for him. Shusheng felt guilty. Meanwhile, after gaining answers from the county magistrate's wife, the features and timeline matched up, and upon observing the child's eyes, the more they resembled his wife, Lin Yong, he reached out to embrace her, but the little maid recoiled in fright, causing a flicker of hurt to cross Jinza's face as he forced a smile. Rue, I am your father." The little maid shook her head, retreating further, clearly frightened by Jinza's earlier actions. Jinza looked at her with sorrowful eyes, murmuring, Rue, I am your father. Don't you remember? Across from our home, there was a vendor selling steamed cakes. You always insisted that your mother buy one every morning before you'd eat breakfast, and it had to have a big red date on top. That year, your mother made a jar of sauce, but you accidentally poured a bowl of water into it and ruined it, which made her furious, and she scolded you in a huff. You stayed in your room refusing to eat, and in the end, I had to bring back a basket of water chestnut cakes to cheer you up. We had a big rooster that you had found in the alley and brought home. But your mother refused to keep it, so you secretly hid it under your blanket at night. He gazed intently at her, his eyes reddening, his voice trembling. The next morning, The bed was covered in feathers. And your mother was so angry that she grabbed a feather duster to punish you, and I ended up helping you, which got us both kicked out. Rue. But the little maid protested. But my father doesn't have a big beard. And he isn't this fierce. She peeked out, her big eyes filled with mist, trembling slightly as she looked at him. Pfft. Chiba couldn't help but laugh. Shushing glanced at the pair and remarked, looking at them. They don't resemble a father and daughter, but rather as if, she paused, a mischievous smile spreading across her face. Jinza, unable to contain himself, leaped up and grabbed his collar in a fit of rage. Bookworm, I've tolerated you for long enough. He raised his hand to strike, only to find his shoulder firmly pressed down, unable to move. Turning around, he saw Chiba with a broad grin on her face. Do you need to calm down a bit? This is truly outrageous. Taking a deep breath, Jinza shouted, Step aside, I don't hit women. Before he could finish, he was slapped against the wall. The family of the magistrate stared in astonishment at Chiba and then at Jinza, who had slid down the wall in shock. Shushing bent down and poked him. Did you knock some sense out of him? Chiba squatted down beside him, casually picking up a shard of porcelain from the ground, and remarked nonchalantly, It's fine. He can take a hit. Jinza spat blood. Once again, he felt humiliated in front of his daughter, and he felt utterly despondent. Chiba adjusted his face, holding the porcelain shard up, but Shusheng quickly snatched it away. She looked at him in confusion, and then Shusheng said, Have you ever shaved? No. Chiba shook his head. Shusheng pointed at his smooth chin, admiring its sharpness. Nodding, Chiba stepped aside, and Shusheng began to trace his jawline with the porcelain shard from behind his ear. Jinza froze in fear, mumbling, This esteemed scholar, could you spare me a bit of mercy? I reflected and realized I haven't shown proper respect to my elders and love for the young, so I decided to make amends. Shusheng said earnestly. Jinza looked utterly hopeless. I can manage on my own. Do you want your daughter or not? Shusheng's words struck him to the core. Jinza gave her a long, forlorn glance but remained motionless. Resigned to his fate, this is a bit awkward. Please don't mind, Shusheng said with a chuckle, and with her movements, more bits of beard fell to the ground. Jinza, with a battered chin, got up and glared at her in outrage. You are here to take revenge on me. Shusheng's eyes sparkled with mischief as she sighed regretfully. Alas, at this rate, you can't be called uncle anymore. Uncle, Jinza fumed, clenching his fists. Chiba approached the little maid. How old is your daughter? Just a little over 8. Jinza shifted his focus, gazing tenderly into the little maid's timid eyes. Rue. Your mother has been so sick from missing you. You don't miss your mother? 8 years old. This meant the little maid should have some memories. However, Jinza seemed rather unreliable. Chiba suggested, I think it would be best to bring your wife here to confirm. Shusheng nodded in agreement. Jinza's recent antics had only deepened the magistrate's impression of his impulsive behavior. And indeed, he should call for the magistrate's wife. Xue Taodao picked up her sleepy son, instructing the steward to tidy up this area and bring several cups of tea in Yangjiao Alley. The wife of the Li family was scolding her husband. You blockhead, can't you just ask your sister for some silver? That's my sister. How could I possibly bring myself to ask? Is there truly not a single coin left at home? Li Chuan mumbled. His head bowed as he pushed his food around, unable to voice his thoughts. Are we not to even light a fire in the house? Li Tian's voice rose sharply. Do you think oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar come free? What you provided was hardly gold. And what of Dabao's marriage portion? Your daughter is growing up. She needs to be adorned in fine garments. Li Chuan swallowed a mouthful of rice. Isn't the marriage portion still some time away? And I is still quite young. Why the hurry? Why the hurry? Why shouldn't my daughter be anxious? Li Tian's eyes widened, sensing her husband's impatience. Softening slightly, she continued. But what of Dabao's marriage portion? The teacher has proclaimed that Dabao is capable of passing the imperial examinations. Li Chuan hesitated before responding. Isn't there still a month left? Ultimately, he was reluctant to ask his sister for money. Li Tian's temper flared, and she slammed her hand on the table, exclaiming, What of it? She is our ancestor. Just because she is married off doesn't mean she can continue to rely on her family. Is it wrong for me to ask her for some silver? If she has the means, she shouldn't be consuming my food or occupying my home. Why shout? You only have a loud voice. Li Chuan retorted, his own temper rising. Did your brother-in-law not send rice and grain? Not to mention, he used to care for us so well. What does his past care matter? He used to bring provisions every month. Now we go months without even a glimpse of him. What if she has abandoned him? What if she ends up being sent back to us, and you have to marry her off again? You foul woman! A dog cannot spit out ivory. Li Chuan's anger flared, pointing a finger at her. Has life become so comfortable for you? Do you think he is unaware? Your sister stays here, shirking all responsibilities, even pushing the washing of undergarments onto her. Is that not the case? Look at Jin Zhe. It's been nearly half a year since he last showed his face. The more Li Tian pondered, the more convinced she became of her deductions, proudly lifting her chin. You seem to be enjoying yourself more with every word. Li Chuan was ready to lash out, truly having no hope for his sister's well-being. Suddenly, his gaze fell behind his wife, and he froze, his expression turning awkward. Sister, what brings you here? He hastily explained. Sister, this woman is prone to speak nonsense. Don't take her words to heart. Lin Yang, slender in form, with a pallor that spoke of long absence from the sun, bore delicate features and melancholy eyes. Why scold her? She spoke no untruths. Lin Yang's demeanor was icy as she clutched a basket of embroidery and made to leave. Sister-in-law, once I sell this embroidery, I shall give you the silver. No worries, sister. There's no rush. No rush. Li Tian chuckled, as if the words just spoken were not her own. Sister, where are you headed? Li Chuan questioned anxiously. To the embroidery shop. A figure rushed in like the wind, colliding with Lin Yang and nearly causing her to stumble. Just as she was about to speak, someone grasped her shoulder, startling her. Lin Yang, he called out, his voice brimming with surprise. Jin Zhe? Lin Yang regarded him silently, extending her hand. Come to deliver the divorce papers. You truly are a bother to have come all this way? No, Lin Yang. What divorce papers? Jin Zhe was bewildered. Lin Yang, I know you resent me for losing our daughter, but trust me, I will find her. His eyes were intense as he pleaded. Lin Yang, let us return home. Home? What home do I have? Lin Yang suddenly laughed coldly. My daughter is lost, and my husband is nowhere to be found. What purpose does it serve for me to remain at home alone? Do you think I am a gravekeeper? She questioned loudly, tears streaming down her face. Jin Zhe, I truly hate you. I hate you. I hate you. Why did you associate with those vile friends, leading to my daughter's misfortune? I have found our daughter, Jin Zhe declared. Lin Yang's eyes widened in disbelief. Chapter 44. Rue, a woman in a yellow dress rushed in, her gaze landing on the anxious little maid sitting on the side. Her eyes reddened as she covered her mouth and walked over, tears streaming down like a small stream from her fingers. Rue, she called tearfully. The little maid tilted her head, asking earnestly, Are you truly my mother? Am I really your daughter? What if you have mistaken me for someone else? Her voice trembled as she spoke, her chubby hands incessantly wiping away tears. She yearned for both her father and mother. Yet she could not take another's parents. How could I mistake my own daughter? She said sorrowfully, her gaze fixed on the maid. You have a black mole on your left wrist and a crescent-shaped birthmark on your lower left back. She gestured with her hands, fearing disbelief. The little maid pouted, her voice quivering. But I don't have that. Woo-woo, everyone was taken aback, and Lin Yang cupped the maid's face, examining it closely, even after all these years apart. I still remember your likeness. How could a mother not recognize her own flesh and blood after carrying you for 10 months? But I don't have a birthmark. What if in the future you find another daughter? The little maid wailed. Jin Zhe stood awkwardly to the side, flustered. Lin Yang, perhaps you are mistaken. I know my daughter. Lin Yang retorted fiercely. I raised her myself. You've only held her a few times. Thus, Jin Zhe could only sit despondently, watching the two of them. Qianyi couldn't bear to watch any longer and stepped forward. Can you see what's behind you? Carefully, she lifted the little maid's shirt, revealing a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left side. The little maid looked bewildered. I don't have it in front, so it shouldn't be behind. Qianyi chuckled, nodding at the wide-eyed Lin Yang. Lin Yang burst into tears. Indeed, you are my daughter, without a doubt. She embraced the little maid tightly. There can be no mistake. Rue, mother has longed for you. Tears streaming down her face, Lin Yang wept loudly while holding her long-lost daughter. The little girl clung to her neck, her eyes brimming with tears. Jin Zhe felt a bitter pang in his heart, repeatedly muttering apologies. Apologies to whom? Perhaps he owed apologies to no one, after they had cried enough. Lin Yang stood, laboriously lifting her daughter. Despite the weight of an 8-year-old child in her own frail frame, she gritted her teeth and carried on. Let us separate, or you may grant me a divorce. The little girl clung tightly to her neck, resting her head on Lin Yang's shoulder. Lin Yang stroked her daughter's hair, her voice soft yet resolute. Jin Zhe was instantly dumbfounded. A man nearing 30 stood there, pitifully gazing at the mother and daughter. Lin Yang, now that you have found your daughter, do not remain angry. Humph, what right do I have to be with you? So small-hearted. Lin Yang scoffed, her words sharp as daggers. Striking deep, if I do not cast you away, shall I allow my daughter to be lost once more? Having spoken, she elegantly carried her daughter and bowed to the county magistrate and others before departing. Jin Zhe, abandoned, stood there in shock, unable to comprehend that he had found his daughter, yet lost his wife in the process. Truly a person of sentiment. What a resilient woman, the county magistrate remarked, turning to pat the forlorn Jin Zhe. Relishing in his misfortune, I have numerous maids. Why not choose another? Jin Zhe lifted his head, his expression one of sorrow and indignation. Ha ha ha! The county magistrate laughed heartily. I told you your wife would run away. Xu Sheng realized he truly had foresight. Jin Zhe, furious, jumped up and cursed. This is all your fault for having a mouth like a crow, and you're reveling in my misfortune. How is it my fault that you are useless? And your daughter was abducted while your wife ran away? Xu Sheng's eyes widened in disbelief. You blame me for this? He sighed. I have traveled this road, yet I am wronged. My lord, will you stand by and watch? Oh. The county magistrate paused, quickly reacting, leaning back in his chair, holding up his teacup. Then, I shall add some water. Xu Sheng turned to look at Qianyi, only to see her finishing the last morsel of tea cake. His anger flaring, she left him nothing, truly heartless. At the Shochuan Medical Hall, Mrs. Jin's husband was treating her grandson. Xu Sheng peeked inside. Shall we go in to take a look? Not interested. Qianyi flatly refused. Hey! Xu Sheng lazily urged the donkey onward, heading toward the city gate. What's the matter? Did the old lady offend you? Not at all. Qianyi sighed. She said she wanted to be a matchmaker for me. It seems that the elderly have peculiar preferences when it comes to matchmaking. Without uttering another word, Xu Sheng cracked the whip, startling the donkey into a frantic run. Ouch! Qianyi, jolted inside, climbed out with difficulty. Peering out to ask, Scholar, are you sure this isn't a revenge against me? Heroine! A trembling voice called out, Help! The road is too steep, the carriage is too bumpy, and the scholar is too unfortunate. A pit had jostled him out. Now he desperately clutched the reins, being dragged along in a small run. Glancing back at him, Qianyi leaped inside, grabbing her bundle and jumping down. Heroine, heroine, don't leave me behind, he cried out in panic. Let go! Qianyi leaped in front of the donkey, then reached out, causing Xu Sheng to think she was about to strike him, hurriedly yelling, Leave me some breath. I'll need compensation. The donkey dashed forth, suddenly halting, extending its nose to sniff, smacking its lips. You remembered to bring it a carrot, but you forgot to bring me something to eat. Xu Sheng gazed at her with a look of reproach, while Qianyi, with her eyelids unflinching, replied coolly, There's still a carrot, if you want. I'm not a donkey. I crave meat. Xu Sheng glared at her, cheeks puffed in indignation. Very well, she extended her hand. Where's the silver? Startled, Xu Sheng jumped back a step, clutching his pocket, exclaiming, Heroine, do not tread down the wrong path. Humph, wrong path? Don't think I've forgotten. It's just a matter of poor memory. Qianyi shot him a cold glance. Gesturing dismissively, hurry, we'll split it when we meet. Must you be so ruthless? Xu Sheng mumbled. I still wish to save some to propose and marry a wife. What are you babbling about? Qianyi's expression shifted instantly, her tone fierce as she snatched the silver pouch from his hands and tucked it into her belt. Hey, 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 Xu Sheng exclaimed in disbelief. Why have you taken it all? Aren't we supposed to split it? Yes, I'll use it, then we'll split it. Quite normal, nothing wrong with that. Faced with an unassailable argument, he weakly asked, Then, can I at least have a bite to eat? After a while, the two sat at a wonton stall. Xu Sheng glanced at the small bowl before him, then at the lavish spread of wontons, meat noodles, and meat buns in front of Qianyi. He swallowed hard. Qianyi, I want to eat meat. Aren't the wontons filled with meat? Qianyi bit into a bun, the pastry enveloping generous chunks of meat mingled with fragrant scallions. With each bite, the juices burst forth, causing her eyes to narrow in delight. Her mood noticeably lifted. Delicious. Xu Sheng stared hungrily at her. How about I trade this bowl of wontons for 2 buns? Qianyi sipped her soup, finishing the last wonton, then dragged the plate of buns closer to herself. Hurry and eat the wontons. They'll be tasteless if they cool down. Though the bowl appeared full, much of it was broth, hardly enough to satiate him. Xu Sheng gazed forlornly as she devoured 5 buns. Thus, when they resumed their journey, Xu Sheng sat sullenly at the cart's edge, silent and frowning. Qianyi paid him no mind, driving the cart forward at a leisurely pace. Alone, Xu Sheng simmered in indignation. Wishing he could vent his frustration, as night fell, with no village in sight and no one nearby, they were forced to camp in the wilderness. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep, finally sitting up in frustration. Qianyi, are you asleep? Qianyi lay with her back to him. Though her eyes were open, she had no intention of responding. Oh, Qianyi, Qianyi. Xu Sheng squatted beside her, calling out. Unable to endure any longer, Qianyi threw off her blanket and sprang up. Can you not scream at night? Staring at her, Xu Sheng gaped, cautiously peering at her expression. Unfortunately, the darkness obscured much. The flickering firelight cast a warm orange glow, allowing him to see only the contours of her exquisite profile, reminiscent of the beauty described in literature. I'm a bit too excited. I can't sleep. He licked his lips, squatting on the ground, captivated by her side profile, with no intention of moving away. How could he not be excited? Soon, he would be marrying a wife. Qianyi scoffed, sitting up and scrutinizing him from head to toe, then remarked condescendingly, given your stature, you should take it easy. Xu Sheng, bewildered, glanced at himself, then at her disdainful expression, and suddenly erupted. What's wrong with my stature? Qianyi shot him a conflicted glance before lying back down, covering her face with a thin blanket. Her voice, muffled beneath it, hinted at displeasure. No opinions here. It's south, not my place to have any. Qianyi. Xu Sheng paused, crouching down to gently poke her. Before he could finish, he was interrupted. Qianyi, impatient, commanded, sleep. But can't you just sleep? However, I have something to say. If you don't want to feed the wolves, then be quiet. Even feeding wolves requires conversation. Xu Sheng adopted a defiant stance. Unfortunately, Qianyi was unyielding, sitting up and pointing a finger at him. Do you know what it means to hit pressure points? Do you know what a sleep pressure point is? Xu Sheng blinked. Confused, isn't that's supposed to be fake? You believe the unbelievable and disbelieve the believable. She shot him a sidelong glance, watching as he toppled forward into her embrace. After a moment, she half-heartedly held him, one hand pressing against his ear, the other brushing over his brow. After a long silence, she softly spoke, her voice as light as morning mist. I owe you nothing, and I don't wish for you to owe me anything. This is just right. This distance is perfect. Do not encroach further, nor do I wish to retreat. Chapter 45. Ian County, though a mere county, is a flourishing region in Qingzhou, the city gate. A throng of people surged. The two, laden with a donkey cart, gazed ahead, and Xu Sheng sighed, pressing his stomach. I'm so hungry. How long must we wait amidst so many people? Soon. It seems there's a temple fair today. Hence the crowd, Qianyi replied, munching on a piece of steamed cake, savoring its sweetness. Though you harbor some grievance against me? Xu Sheng eyed the cake longingly, having eaten nothing since last night, and now the sun was high. What brings that thought to mind? Qianyi asked, surprised. Then why don't you share a single bite with me? Xu Sheng regarded her disdainfully. You dare to act without speaking? Well, Qianyi fretted. I'm doing this for your own good. What if you embarrass yourself at your father-in-law's house after overeating? Hungry? Here, drink some water. She offered him a water pouch. Xu Sheng took it begrudgingly, stuffing it beneath himself, grumbling, May you die of thirst. Qianyi rolled her eyes at him. Upon entering the city, Qianyi asked, Shall we go directly to your father-in-law's house? Xu Sheng laughed in disbelief. You're so eager to toss me over there. Qianyi nodded matter-of-factly. Of course, I want to eat. You would certainly try to snatch from me. At the inn, as they dismounted, a fragrant breeze swept past, accompanied by the sound of jingling bells. The sweet, delicate voice of a young lady floated over Chi-jun. I don't want to go. The young lady pouted, waving her fan, her almond eyes glancing sideways at the young man beside her. Chi-jun, clad in a blue coat over white garments, strode confidently, pride etched on his brow. With a charming smile, he asked, Are you tired, Jiao Jiao? Yes, I'm all sweaty from the walk, she pouted, fidgeting with her fan. Didn't you say you wanted to see that painting? Why the sudden loss of patience? Chi-jun affectionately tapped her forehead. I even specifically chose a piece of jewelry to match your beauty. The young lady stood on tiptoe, craning her neck to look ahead, but we still have a long way to go. I should have taken a sedan chair. She feigned annoyance, blaming him. But if I did that, I would miss seeing Miss One. Who would I devote my yearning to? Chi-jun adored her spirited temperament, which could tease without causing pain. Humph, is it so easy to see the daughters of the one family? She pouted, frowning, playfully swatting at him with her fan. Chi-jun seized her delicate hand, speaking earnestly. I know it's not easy, so I must ask for your understanding. The color of embarrassment bloomed on her cheeks as when Jiao Jiao, half shy and half feigning anger, flicked her hand. I'm tired. I don't want to walk anymore. With that, she turned and headed toward the inn. Her slender waist, cinched with a pink and silver thread belt, bore a small fish made of tiny golden beads dangling from the end, its mouth adorned with a lustrous pearl, swaying gracefully with her every step. Behind her, Chi-jun's gaze darkened. Qianyi, uninterested in her meal, cast her eyes toward Xu Shang, who was still staring at the two departing figures, particularly the young lady in the pink lotus dress. A surge of unnameable fury ignited within her. She bit into her braised meat with ferocity, chewing with clenched teeth. When Xu Shang turned back, he was startled to see her face twisted in anger, cautiously asking, What's wrong with you? Qianyi set down her chopsticks, covering half her face. Too thick. Too thick. Xu Shang observed the table laden with dishes, most of which were meat, and lamented, What a pity. He laughed heartily. Then I shall not hold back with that. He quickly dug in, shoveling rice. Is it pretty? She asked suddenly. Xu Shang, mouth full, nearly choked, and after a labored swallow, he pounded his chest. Could you not scare me while I'm eating? Very beautiful. Qianyi nodded to herself, her gaze drifting to the upper floor across the way. Lost in thought, is this what a young lady of wealth looks like? Every frown and smile, every stillness and movement, is as pleasing to the eye as a painting. She sighed quietly, lifting her bowl and consuming her meal heartily. Xu Shang watched as she alternated between a chicken leg and a piece of meat, unable to help but ask, Heroine, has your tooth stopped hurting? Qianyi paused. If I forget it, then it doesn't hurt. She continued eating. Xu Shang was bewildered. What does it mean that it doesn't hurt if you forget it? As he pondered, the dishes on the table had diminished significantly, prompting him to exclaim, Can't you leave some for me? Do they not consume an abundance of pine cakes? How can they possibly eat so much? Xu Shang muttered in discontent. It has been quite a while since I practiced my boxing. Qianyi suddenly interjected. Xu Shang instantly fell silent. After their meal, Qianyi expressed his desire to practice his skills, and after a moment's hesitation, Xu Shang refrained from voicing his concerns, thinking that if he trained any further, he might never be able to marry. In Jinyu Lu, Xu Shang found himself troubled by the items before him. Noticing the numerous patches on his robe, the servant could not help but advise. Would you like to consider some ear studs or similar items? Such hairpins and ornaments certainly require a fair amount of silver. Xu Shang lifted his gaze to him, smiled lightly. It matters not. Can you help me contemplate what would be suitable to gift to a young lady? A young lady, you say? The servant furrowed his brow in deep thought. If it were for my own sister, I would suggest ear studs or earrings, but for a lady one admires, a hairpin would be appropriate. Xu Shang began rummaging through the items. A hairpin? Ah, gifting a lady one admires certainly requires careful consideration. The servant winked mysteriously and remarked, If it is merely for fleeting amusement, then a flashy yet insubstantial hairpin would suffice. This one is gilded, though quite exquisite. He handed a floral hairpin to Xu Shang, who glanced at it with disinterest. What if it were for the lady I intend to marry? Ah, now that indeed requires careful thought. The servant, having witnessed many gifts given to courtesans and favored companions, had seldom seen someone personally selecting jewelry for their future wife. Look at this peony flower, and this one depicting fortune, prosperity, longevity, and joy. The servant clattered a collection of items before him. This hairpin, along with this bracelet, and a matching pair of ear studs. Anything too extravagant would likely be unappealing to her. On the second floor, when Jiao Jiao, her face flushed and lips a deep crimson, occasionally cast startled glances at Qi Jun beside her. Quickly averting her gaze, tilting her face slightly, delicate gold flowers dangled from her earlobes, swaying gracefully against her fair neck. Unbeknownst to her, Qi Jun had said something that elicited a soft giggle from her, causing her golden hairpin to tremble, igniting a mix of excitement and longing within him. "Are you pleased now?" Qi Jun whispered in her ear. When Jiao Jiao lifted her eyes, her gaze shimmering with deep affection mingled with a hint of grievance from past hurts. "What do you mean by that? Do you think I am here for such trivialities? You, knowing full well my sentiments, still choose to inquire about these matters. Here, take them back." Her eyes slightly reddened. She feigned the act of removing her earrings and hairpin to return them to him. Alarmed, Qi Jun swiftly embraced her, pleading, "My dear little lady, you know that is not my intention." He held her close, softly uttering countless apologies until when Jiao Jiao finally broke into a smile, playfully scolding. "You know I appreciate your genuine intentions, yet you enjoy provoking me. Our one family is not lacking in such trifles. I am not one of those shallow individuals," she huffed, half in jest, half in pride. "Indeed, Miss One is a lady of considerable worth. How could one compare her to those common, superficial women?" the servant praised, and when Jiao Jiao pouted in annoyance, playfully twisting his waist, Qi Jun winced, feigning pain, which only elicited a playful admonishment from when Jiao Jiao. The pair meandered downstairs, and when Jiao Jiao gestured, "Shopkeeper, fetch the piece of jade I examined a few days ago." As they approached Shushang, when Jiao Jiao cast a disdainful glance at him, her brows knitting in disapproval. "Shopkeeper, hurry up." The shopkeeper hurried over, presenting a box. "Miss One, here is the jade you had your eye on." Upon opening the box, she revealed a piece of white jade, lifting it to measure against Qi Jun's waist, smiling. "When we return, let the maid create a cord for it." "Maid? No, I shall have you do it for me," Qi Jun teased, lightly stroking her hand. When Jiao Jiao shot him an indignant look, "Shopkeeper, settle the account with the One family. Let us go. My carriage has arrived to fetch me." "So early?" Qi Jun expressed his disappointment. "I had hoped to take you to see a performance, perhaps next time. My father mentioned some relatives of acquaintances would be visiting, and he wishes for me to meet them." She regarded him, her eyes sparkling with a flirtatious allure, youthful yet brimming with tantalizing possibilities. "What relatives?" Qi Jun's countenance darkened, expressing his displeasure. "What is there to see?" When Jiao Jiao playfully nudged him, "Such jealousy." After taking a few steps, she turned back and smiled sweetly at him. Qi Jun's eyes brightened, and he hurriedly followed her out. In the carriage, the One family's driver was already preparing to return, while a maid poured tea for Wen Jiao Jiao. Upon seeing Qi Jun board, she froze, glancing at Wen Jiao Jiao. "Miss?" Wen Jiao Jiao waved her hand, signaling her to sit outside. "I truly must return. Otherwise, I shall face reprimand." She toyed with her hair, smiling down, her hairpin swaying mesmerizingly. The carriage swayed gently, stirring emotions within. Qi Jun leaned closer, inhaling her fragrant hair. "Shall we go boating tomorrow?" "That won't do." When Jiao Jiao bit her lip, "My mother says that young ladies should not indulge in such frivolities." She hesitated, glancing at him. She said. Her voice trailed off, biting her crimson lip. Qi Jun gently caressed her cheek, marveling at her youthful, supple skin that was utterly captivating. "What did your mother say?" he asked absent-mindedly. "She said, I am no longer a child and must not continue in such ways. It is time to arrange my marriage." Her voice was barely a whisper, her face turning crimson as she bowed her head, fidgeting with her handkerchief. "Then I shall return to prepare for the proposal." Qi Jun lifted her chin, his gaze profound and earnest. "Will you marry me?" When Jiao Jiao's almond-shaped eyes glistened with tears of surprise. "Is it true? Qi Lang truly intends to marry me?" Qi Jun tenderly wiped away a tear with his thumb, speaking softly. "Of course. Who else would I marry?" He leaned down to kiss her blood-red lips. When Jiao Jiao blinked, her tears dissipating, shyness enveloping her. She closed her eyes and tilted her head slightly. Seeing this, Jun seized the moment and kissed her without restraint. Chapter 46. As the carriage gradually receded, the shopkeeper sighed and hummed a little tune, retreating to a private room with a pot of tea, savoring his leisure. Idly playing with a silver bracelet depicting fish frolicking among the lotus flowers. Xu Shang casually remarked, "That couple certainly appears affluent." The servant raised an eyebrow and gave a thumbs up. "Indeed, your discernment is commendable. One is the eldest son of the county magistrate, and the other is the daughter of our county's wealthiest family." "It is truly a match made in heaven," the servant exclaimed. Xu Shang corrected him. "It is the opposite. It should be a handsome man with a wealthy woman." "What do you mean by the opposite?" The servant, puzzled, scratched his head. "Sir, would you like to have it wrapped?" "Yes, this bracelet, along with the peony hairpin and this pair of peony-styled ear studs." Xu Sheng surveyed the offerings, seeking anything else that caught his eye. "Sir, is there anything else you desire?" The servant diligently packed the items in a wooden box. "What is this?" Xu Sheng's gaze landed on a particular item. "Oh, this is a silver bell." The servant winked at him, animatedly explaining, "The young ladies adore wearing these at their waists. When they walk, the gentle jingling complements their graceful movements." All right. Xu Sheng quickly halted the servant's fanciful musings. "I will take this. How much do I owe you?" In the inn, Qianyi was busy stretching her limbs when she heard footsteps approaching, pausing momentarily at her door before moving on. Shortly thereafter, there was commotion from the neighboring room. Qianyi sighed. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, dragging over a chair to rest her arms upon, straining her ears to listen to the sound of water splashing from the other side. What could they possibly be bathing for? She wondered, glancing at the sky. With a sudden motion, she opened the door, her expression devoid of emotion as she observed Xu Sheng, who was about to pass by. Her gaze swept over him, noting that he had bathed, washed his hair, and donned a clean outfit, with not a single patch in sight. At first glance, he could easily be mistaken for a scholar emerging from a prestigious academy, completely shedding his previous impoverished appearance. "How do I look?" Xu Sheng approached her, a hint of pride in his demeanor as he flicked his sleeves, one hand clasped behind him, the other resting on his abdomen. After a few steps, he turned back, his eyes sparkling. "Do I possess an air of elegance?" "You remind me of a dish," Qianyi replied leisurely. Xu Sheng stared at her, momentarily speechless. "I think I shall refrain from asking." Qianyi nodded, signaling him to make his exit. After taking a few steps, he hesitated and turned back. "What dish?" "Scallions mixed with tofu." Upon exiting the inn, Xu Sheng continued to ponder the meaning behind scallions mixed with tofu.